She pressed herself further under the closed storefront's awning, one hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly, while the other clutched a neatly folded stack of clothes. Even now, homeless and freezing, she couldn't shake her methodical nature, each piece precisely creased, a small attempt to maintain order in her chaotic world. The small breathed tattoo on her wrist caught her eye as she adjusted her clothes. She'd given it to herself after losing her first baby, a constant reminder to keep going when everything fell apart. Now, at 28, she was determined this time would be different. This baby, her Ethan, would have a chance. Jasmine pulled her tight bun even tighter, a habit she'd developed when stressed. Her curly hair fought against the constraint, much like she fought against the urge to give in to despair. The night was getting colder, and the shops had long since closed their doors. The street, usually bustling with college students and tourists, had emptied except for the occasional car hurrying past, their headlights casting long shadows that danced across the snow-dusted sidewalk. She shifted her weight, trying to find a position that would ease the ache in her lower back. 6 months pregnant, and every movement reminded her of her condition. A nearby streetlight flickered, and Jasmine tensed, her eyes scanning the darkness. She'd learned to be cautious, especially at night, but her options were limited. The shelters were full. She'd checked 3 times, and her pride wouldn't let her beg. The sound of small boots clicking against the icy sidewalk drew her attention. A little girl's voice carried through the bitter wind, chattering about her day at school. Jasmine instinctively stepped deeper into the shadows of the awning, not wanting to frighten anyone with her presence. "But Daddy, why can't stars come down to play? They look so lonely up there." The child's voice grew closer, accompanied by heavier footsteps. Jasmine glimpsed a flash of pink, a puffy jacket covered in stickers, and a pair of light-up shoes that blinked with each step. The girl was perched on her father's shoulders, her small hands wrapped in his thick, work-roughened ones. Oliver Thomas Bennett wasn't the type of man who usually caught Jasmine's attention. His clothes were practical rather than fashionable, worn jeans, steel-toed boots, and a heavy canvas jacket that had seen better days. But there was something in the gentle way he held his daughter's legs, ensuring she wouldn't slip, that made Jasmine's heart twist with an unexpected ache. "Stars have important work to do, Riley June," he answered, his voice low and steady. "They're like nightlights for the whole world." The girl, Riley, giggled, the sound pure and bright against the winter silence. "I like my unicorn nightlight, exactly like that, princess." They were almost past the storefront when Riley spotted Jasmine. The girl's laughter stopped abruptly, and Jasmine felt herself being studied by curious young eyes. She waited for the father to hurry past, to shield his daughter's eyes, to shoot her the looks of pity or judgment she'd grown accustomed to receiving. Instead, Oliver stopped. His blue-grey eyes met Jasmine's, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition of pain, of struggle, of the weight of responsibility. He didn't speak immediately, and neither did she. The wind howled around them, carrying snowflakes that caught in Riley's blonde hair. "Miss," Oliver's voice was hesitant but firm, "it's dropping below 0 tonight." Jasmine straightened her spine, one hand still protective over her belly. "I'm fine," she said, the words automatic, practiced. Riley squirmed on her father's shoulders. "Daddy, she's shaking like when I forgot my mittens at school." Oliver carefully lifted his daughter down, setting her on her feet beside him. He kept one hand on Riley's shoulder as he studied Jasmine more carefully. His eyes took in her pregnant form, the neat stack of clothes, the way she held herself with dignity despite her circumstances. "Now we have a spare room," he said finally, "and my mother makes enough soup to feed half of Burlington." Jasmine bit her lower lip, an anxious tell she'd never managed to break. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity." Oliver's voice remained steady. "It's just soup and a warm place to sleep." Riley tugged at her father's hand. "Can she tell stories?" "Daddy's stories always have the same ending." Despite herself, Jasmine felt a smile threaten the corners of her mouth. The girl's innocent question cut through the tension like a warm knife through butter. She looked at Oliver again, seeing past the initial impression of rustic strength to something deeper, a kindness in his eyes that reminded her of better days. "Just for tonight," Jasmine found herself saying, though she wasn't sure if she was telling them or herself. "Just until it warms up." Oliver nodded, no triumph or pity in his expression, just simple acceptance. Riley bounced on her toes, her shoes creating a light show on the snowy sidewalk. "I'm Riley June Bennett," she announced proudly, "and that's my daddy." And we live in the blue house with the big tree, and Grandma makes the best hot chocolate in the whole wide world." As they walked through the snow-hushed streets, Jasmine kept a careful distance behind Oliver and Riley. She watched as the father pointed out constellations to his daughter, making up stories about star pirates and moonbeam surfers. Her hand never left her belly, where Ethan moved restlessly, as if sensing the change in their circumstances. The blue house with the big tree emerged from the darkness, a two-story craftsman-style home that had seen its share of winters but stood proud against the night sky. Light spilled from the windows, warm and inviting, and as they approached, the front door opened. A small woman with silver hair and a hand-knitted cardigan stood in the doorway, her face a map of gentle wrinkles and knowing eyes. "Oliver Thomas Bennett," she called out, her voice carrying the weight of years of maternal authority. "I was about to send out a search party." Her eyes fell on Jasmine, and something flickered in their depths, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared history of difficult choices. As Jasmine crossed the threshold into the warm house, the scent of homemade soup and freshly baked bread enveloped her. For the first time in months, she felt something dangerous begin to bloom in her chest. Hope, just for tonight, she reminded herself. But even as the thought formed, she knew some nights had the power to change everything that followed. Margaret Bennett's kitchen felt like stepping into another world. Steam rose from a pot of vegetable soup on the stove, dancing in the warm light of antique pendant lamps. Jasmine sat rigidly at the oak table, her fingers tracing the grain of wood, worn smooth by years of family meals. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking each moment she stayed in this house that wasn't hers. "You need to eat more than that," Margaret said, ladling a second helping into Jasmine's bowl. Her silver hair caught the light as she moved, creating a halo effect that reminded Jasmine of her own grandmother. "The baby needs the nutrients." Jasmine's hand instinctively went to her belly. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. But—" "Margaret," the older woman corrected, settling into the chair across from her. "Mrs. Bennett was my mother-in-law. God rest her soul. Formidable woman. Kept doilies on everything, even the toaster." A small laugh escaped Jasmine before she could catch it. In the living room, she could hear Riley's animated voice as Oliver tried to convince her it was bedtime. The girls' protests about wanting to stay up with their guest grew progressively more creative. "But Daddy, what if she needs help counting the stars? Or what if she doesn't know where the bathroom is in the dark? Or what if—" "Riley June," Oliver's voice carried that gentle firmness Jasmine had noticed earlier. "Our guest needs rest too. You can show her your star collection tomorrow. Promise. Promise. Now." Teeth brushed, pajamas on. The sound of little feet thundering up the stairs filled the house, followed by Oliver's heavier tread. Jasmine found herself categorizing these domestic sounds, filing them away like precious documents. The soup warmed her from the inside, rich with vegetables and herbs she couldn't name. Margaret watched her eat with knowing eyes. "Oliver was 5 when we moved here," she said, getting up to pour herself a cup of tea. "The house was in worse shape then. His father, rest his soul, had big plans for fixing it up. Never got the chance." She paused, stirring honey into her tea. "Oliver's been fixing things ever since." Jasmine looked up from her soup, catching the weight of unspoken meaning in Margaret's words. "He seems like a good father." "He is." Margaret's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Though sometimes I think he forgets he's allowed to be more than just Riley's father." She set a second cup of tea in front of Jasmine, chamomile, perfect for pregnancy. "So just like you're allowed to be more than your circumstances." Before Jasmine could respond, rapid footsteps descended the stairs. Riley burst into the kitchen wearing unicorn pajamas, her blonde hair damp from washing her face. "Good night, Hug," she announced, then stopped short, suddenly shy in front of Jasmine. Oliver appeared behind her, now wearing a faded Burlington Carpenter's Union t-shirt that showed the full extent of his work-built frame. "Riley," he started, but his daughter had already made up her mind. She darted forward and wrapped her arms around Jasmine's middle, careful of her belly. "Good night, Miss Jasmine. Good night, baby." Then she was off again, hugging her grandmother and father before disappearing upstairs in a whirlwind of energy. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the gentle bubbling of soup and the ticking clock. Oliver cleared his throat. "I'll show you to the guest room." "It's not much, but it's warm." Jasmine gathered her small stack of clothes, following Oliver up the creaking stairs. Family photos lined the walls, Riley at various ages, Oliver in work clothes standing proud next to finished carpentry projects, and an elegant woman with Riley's blonde hair and bright smile. Jasmine noticed how Oliver's eyes skipped over these particular photos. The guest room was small but clean, with a quilted bed and a window that looked out over the backyard. A massive oak tree's branches swayed in the winter wind, its shadows dancing on the snow below. "Bathrooms across the hall," Oliver said, lingering in the doorway. "If you need anything," he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Well, we're here." "Thank you," Jasmine said softly. "Just for tonight." Oliver nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sleep well, Miss Carter." "Jasmine," she corrected, surprising herself. "Just Jasmine." After he left, Jasmine stood in the middle of the room, taking in the details. A hand-crocheted throw draped over a rocking chair, a small vase of dried lavender on the dresser, a bookmark stuck in a novel on the bedside table. The room felt lived in, loved. She arranged her clothes in a neat row on the dresser, each piece folded with precise corners. The organization calmed her, gave her a sense of control. When everything was in its place, she changed into her sleeping clothes and sat on the bed's edge. Ethan kicked, a strong movement that brought tears to her eyes. "We're okay," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "We're okay." The night deepened, and sleep eluded her. The house made unfamiliar sounds, the heating system humming to life, floorboards settling, wind whistling through old window frames. Around midnight, she heard soft footsteps in the hall, followed by Riley's door opening. "Bad dream, Princess," Oliver's voice, barely audible. The dark was too dark. "Want me to check for monsters?" "No. Can you just stay? Like before." Silence, then the creak of Riley's bed. "Scoot over, kiddo." Jasmine lay in the darkness, listening to the muffled sound of Oliver humming what seemed to be an old country song. Her hand found her wrist, fingers tracing the "breathe" tattoo. The memory of giving it to herself rose unbidden. The sterile smell of the tattoo shop where she worked, the buzz of the machine, the need to mark her skin with a reminder to keep going after losing her first baby. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes again, early morning light was filtering through the window. The smell of coffee and something baking drifted up from the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented, she forgot where she was. Reality crashed back as she heard Riley's voice from the backyard. "Daddy, look, the cardinal's back." Jasmine rose carefully, her body stiff from the unfamiliar bed. She dressed methodically, smoothing her clothes with shaking hands. The mirror above the dresser reflected a woman trying desperately to look put together, to maintain dignity and borrowed shelter. When she descended the stairs, she found Margaret in the kitchen kneading dough on a flour-dusted counter. The older woman looked up, flour on her cheek. "Perfect timing. The cinnamon rolls are almost ready." Through the kitchen window, Jasmine could see Oliver and Riley in the backyard. They had filled a bird feeder, and Riley was bouncing with excitement as birds swooped down to feed. Oliver stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, saying something that made his daughter laugh. "He built that feeder last spring," Margaret said, following Jasmine's gaze. "Riley asked for one after learning about birds in school. Oliver spent weeks getting the design just right." She wiped her hands on her apron. "That's how he loves. Quietly, thoroughly, with everything he has." Jasmine turned from the window, unable to watch the scene any longer. It hurt too much, this glimpse of what family could be. "I should go, I've imposed enough." Margaret's hands stilled in the dough. "Jasmine," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "the storm's getting worse. Look outside." Sure enough, snow was falling heavily now, the wind driving it sideways. The weather report playing softly on the kitchen radio warned of dangerous conditions, advising everyone to stay indoors. "Just until the storm passes," Margaret said, returning to her kneading. "Sometimes life forces us to be still for a reason." The back door opened, letting in a burst of cold air and Riley's laughter. The girl's cheeks were red from the cold, her eyes bright with excitement. "Miss Jasmine, we saw 7 different birds, and Daddy says we might see a blue jay if we're really quiet and patient." Oliver stamped snow from his boots. His own face flushed from the cold. His eyes met Jasmine's, and something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared loneliness. "Breakfast first," Margaret announced. "Riley June Bennett, wash those hands." Oliver set the table. She turned to Jasmine with a warm smile. "And you, dear, sit down before you fall down. The baby needs breakfast too." Jasmine found herself guided to a chair, a mug of decaf coffee placed in front of her. As the Bennett family moved around her in their morning routine, she felt something inside her begin to crack, not breaking exactly, but softening, like ice at the first hint of spring. Just until the storm passes, she told herself. But watching Riley arrange napkins with careful concentration, seeing Oliver's gentle corrections of his daughter's placement, feeling Margaret's quiet presence behind it all, Jasmine wondered if some storms came not to destroy, but to clear the way for something new to grow. 3 days into the storm, Jasmine couldn't stand the chaos in the kitchen cabinets anymore. She'd watched Margaret searching for ingredients that morning, opening and closing doors with increasing frustration, and something inside her snapped, not in anger, but in purpose. While the Bennett family slept, she stood in the quiet kitchen, moonlight streaming through the windows. Snow still fell outside, but softer now, like nature was holding its breath. Jasmine pulled her hair back tight, rolled up her sleeves, and began. She emptied the cabinets methodically, creating organized piles on every available surface. Expired items in one stack, baking supplies in another, canned goods lined up by type. Her pregnant body protested the movement, but her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. "You don't have to do that." Oliver's voice startled her. She turned to find him in the kitchen doorway, wearing flannel pajama pants and that same worn Union t-shirt. His hair was mussed from sleep, and something about its dishevelment made him seem more human, less the stoic figure she'd been carefully avoiding. "I know," Jasmine replied, turning back to her task, "but I want to. It helps me think." Instead of leaving, Oliver moved into the kitchen. He studied her system for a moment, then began gathering the expired items into a garbage bag. They worked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the soft clink of jars and the whisper of labels against wood. "You're good at this," he said finally, watching her create a perfectly aligned row of spice jars. "The organizing." Jasmine's hands stilled on a bottle of cinnamon. "I used to work in office administration before—" She gestured vaguely at her circumstances. "Before life took a turn." She nodded, grateful he didn't push for details. They continued working, and gradually, the kitchen transformed. Every cabinet had a purpose now. Baking supplies arranged by frequency of use, canned goods organized by type and expiration date, spices in alphabetical order. "Mom's going to love this," Oliver said, closing the last cabinet. "She's been talking about organizing these since Dad passed." The mention of his father hung in the air between them. Jasmine watched Oliver's face in the moonlight, seeing the shadows of loss there. "How long ago?" 5 years. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Heart attack. He was refinishing the front porch steps when it happened." "Is that why you became a carpenter?" "No, I was already apprenticing then, but it's why I finished those steps myself. Couldn't leave his last project undone." Jasmine understood that kind of dedication. Her hand drifted to her belly, to Ethan moving beneath her heart. "Some things need to be finished." Oliver's eyes followed her movement. "The baby's father isn't in the picture." She cut him off, her voice firm. "And that's better for everyone." He nodded, accepting her boundary without question. The kitchen clock ticked past 3 a.m., but neither moved to leave. There was something comfortable about the quiet, about being awake while the rest of the world slept. "Riley's mother," Jasmine said softly, offering a truth for the one he'd shared. "I saw her pictures on the wall." "Annabelle," Oliver's voice carried the weight of old grief. "Car accident 2 years ago. Black ice on Route 7. I'm sorry." "Yeah." He pushed off from the counter. "Me too." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken understanding. Then Riley's voice called from upstairs, small and frightened. "Daddy." "Nightmare," Oliver explained, already moving. "She gets them more often when it storms." Jasmine watched him take the stairs 2 at a time, his footsteps nearly silent despite his size. She finished wiping down the counters, then paused at the bottom of the stairs, listening to Oliver's low voice telling Riley a story about brave little birds who weren't afraid of storms. The next morning, Margaret's exclamation of joy at the organized kitchen brought everyone running. "Look at this," she called, opening and closing cabinets with delight. "Everything's exactly where it should be." Riley bounced around the kitchen, reading labels out loud as she discovered them. "Cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice. They're in alphabet order, Grandma." "Alphabetical," Jasmine corrected gently, then bit her lip, worried she'd overstepped. But Riley beamed at her. "Will you help me organize my stuffed animals like this? They keep fighting because they don't know where to sit." Before Jasmine could answer, a knock at the front door made everyone freeze. Oliver moved to answer it, his body tense. Through the frost-covered window, Jasmine could make out the shape of a police car. "Mr. Bennett." A female officer stood on the porch, snow swirling around her. "Jazz, we're checking on residents, making sure everyone has heat and supplies. This storm's worse than expected." "We're fine," Oliver assured her. "Got a full pantry and good insulation." The officer nodded, then spotted Jasmine in the hallway. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, or suspicion. "Ma'am, are you staying here?" Jasmine stepped forward, her spine straight, despite her fear. "Yes." The Bennetts were kind enough to offer shelter during the storm. She waited for questions, for demands to see ID she no longer had, for the judgment she'd faced so many times before. Instead, the officer smiled. "Good. We've been worried about people stuck out in this weather. Take care, folks." After she left, Jasmine realized she'd been holding her breath. Oliver touched her shoulder briefly as he passed, the first time he'd initiated contact. "You're safe here," he said quietly, then continued to the kitchen where Riley was still cataloging spices. The day passed in a blur of domestic activity. Margaret taught Riley to make snow cream on the back porch, carefully gathering clean snow and mixing it with vanilla and cream. Oliver disappeared into his workshop in the converted garage, the sound of his saw a steady rhythm beneath the howling wind. Jasmine found herself in Riley's room, surrounded by stuffed animals as the little girl explained each one's personality in detail. Together, they arranged them on shelves and the bed, predators and prey separately, at Riley's insistence, so nobody gets scared at night. "Miss Jasmine," Riley asked as they worked, "did you have stuffed animals when you were little?" "One," Jasmine admitted. "A black cat named Midnight. What happened to him?" "I had to leave him behind when I moved." Riley processed this, her small face serious. Then she reached for a well-loved stuffed kitten from her collection. "This is Shadow. She's really good at protecting people from bad dreams. Maybe she can protect you too." Jasmine's throat tightened. "That's very kind, Riley, but she's yours." "She wants to stay with you and the baby." Riley placed the kitten in Jasmine's hands with ceremony. "She told me so." Later that evening, after Riley was asleep, Jasmine sat in the guest room, her room for now, holding Shadow the kitten. The stuffed animal's fur was worn soft with love, one ear slightly crooked from years of cuddling. A knock at her door revealed Margaret, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I thought you might like some company," she said, offering Jasmine a steaming cup, "and maybe a chance to talk." Jasmine accepted the tea, making room for Margaret on the bed. The older woman settled beside her, her eyes falling on Shadow. "Riley gave you her guardian." I tried to say no. "That child has her mother's heart," Margaret said softly. "Sees what people need before they know it themselves." She sipped her tea, then added, "Like how you needed to organize that kitchen." Jasmine stared into her mug. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." "Overstepped? Dear, you did what none of us had the courage to do. That kitchen's been chaos since my husband died. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what needs fixing." Margaret patted her hand. "Just like sometimes it takes a stranger to help a family remember how to be whole." "I'm not staying," Jasmine reminded her, but the words lacked their earlier conviction. "No," Margaret stood, gathering her empty mug. "Well, wherever you end up, remember this. Strength isn't just about standing alone. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let ourselves belong somewhere." She left Jasmine with those words and the sound of the storm outside. In the darkness, Jasmine held Shadow close, breathing in the scent of childhood and trust. Downstairs, she could hear Oliver in his workshop, still working despite the hour. The rhythm of his saw felt like a lullaby now, as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Just until the storm passes," she whispered to her belly, to Shadow, to herself. But even as she said it, she knew storms had a way of changing landscapes forever, of carving new paths where none existed before. And sometimes, just sometimes, those paths led home. A week after the storm began, Jasmine woke to the sound of frustrated muttering from Oliver's workshop. The morning light was grey and diffused, snow still falling in lazy spirals outside her window. Shadow, the stuffed kitten, sat guard on her nightstand, watching over her growing belly with button eyes. She dressed carefully in her last clean outfit, her oversized sweater and maternity jeans she'd found at a thrift store. Her hair, she noticed with dismay, needed washing. The thought of asking to use more of the Bennetts' utilities made her stomach clench. The workshop door was ajar when she reached it, releasing the scent of sawdust and varnish into the cold morning air. Oliver stood at his workbench, surrounded by papers covered in sketches and calculations. His shoulders were tense, one hand running through his hair in frustration. "Something wrong?" Jasmine asked, hovering in the doorway. Oliver started, then relaxed when he saw her. Just trying to figure out these accounts. Got a big commission for a custom dining set, but I can't make sense of the material costs versus what I quoted. He gestured at the scattered papers. Numbers were never my strong suit. Jasmine stepped into the workshop, drawn by the familiar sight of disorganized paperwork. Her fingers itched to put things in order. "May I?" Oliver stepped back, watching as she began sorting through the papers. Her administrative experience kicked in, and soon she had created neat piles, invoices, material lists, client correspondence, and design sketches. "You've been undercharging for your labor," she said after reviewing the numbers, "and these material costs aren't factoring in the recent price increases for hardwood." "How do you know about hardwood prices?" "I read." Jasmine pointed to a trade magazine buried under the papers. "Your latest issue shows a 15% increase in oak prices alone." Oliver leaned against the workbench, studying her with new interest. "You really know your stuff." "I should. I managed accounts for 3 different businesses before—" She trailed off, her hand instinctively going to her belly. Ethan kicked, as if reminding her of all that had changed. "Before life took a turn," Oliver finished, using the same phrase from their late-night kitchen conversation. He hesitated, then asked, "Would you want to help? With the books? I mean, I can pay you." Jasmine's pride warred with her practical nature. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's business." Oliver gestured at the organized piles. "You've done more in 10 minutes than I manage in a week. I need help, and you need work. Simple as that." Before she could respond, Riley's voice carried from the house. "Daddy, Miss Jasmine, Grandma says breakfast is ready, and if you don't come now, the pancakes will get sad." They shared a smile at Riley's earnestness. Think about it," Oliver said as they headed inside. "No pressure." The kitchen was warm and bright, Margaret at the stove flipping perfectly golden pancakes, while Riley arranged fresh berries into smiley faces on each plate. The domesticity of the scene made Jasmine's chest ache. "Just in time," Margaret announced. "Riley, love, save some berries for the pancakes. They can't all be for decorating." "But Grandma, Miss Jasmine's baby, needs extra smiles. I read that babies can feel when their mummies are happy." Jasmine froze at the word mommy, her fork halfway to her mouth. Riley continued chattering, oblivious to the impact of her words, but Oliver noticed. He cleared his throat. "Riley, remember what we talked about giving Miss Jasmine space?" "Sorry," Riley mumbled, her face falling. "I just thought, it's okay," Jasmine found herself saying. "The smiles are beautiful, Riley." "Thank you." After breakfast, while Oliver took Riley to her delayed opening school, the roads finally clear enough for travel, Jasmine helped Margaret with the dishes. The older woman hummed as she worked, an old song Jasmine half recognized. "That tune," Jasmine said, "I know it from somewhere. Moon River. My Harry used to sing it." Margaret smiled at the memory. Not well, mind you, but with feeling. "It was playing the night we met, at a dance hall in Burlington. I was 17 and thought I knew everything. He was 20 and knew he didn't know anything at all." Jasmine dried a plate, careful with the delicate china. "How did you know that he was the one?" "Oh, I didn't. Not at first." Margaret handed her another dish. "Love isn't always a lightning bolt, dear. Sometimes it's more like morning light. So gradual you don't notice until suddenly the whole world is bright." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Margaret said, "I heard Oliver offer you the bookkeeping job. I haven't decided yet." Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. "You know, when Harry died, Oliver tried to handle everything himself. The house, Riley, the business, me. Nearly ran himself into the ground trying to be everything for everyone." She touched Jasmine's arm gently. "Sometimes help isn't just for us. Sometimes letting people help us is a way of helping them too." The words stayed with Jasmine as she retreated to her room, ostensibly to rest but really to think. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the snow finally begin to ease. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman changed from the one who'd stood under that store awning. Still cautious, still proud, but something else too, something softer. A knock at her door revealed Oliver, home from dropping off Riley. "Got a minute?" She nodded, and he entered, carrying something large wrapped in a drop cloth. "Made this last night." After our talk about organization, he unveiled a wooden filing cabinet, beautifully crafted from cherry wood with brass handles. "For the workshop," he explained. "If you decide to help with the books, and if you don't, well, I needed one anyway." Jasmine ran her fingers over the smooth wood, feeling the care in every joint and curve. "It's beautiful." "Beauty and function," Oliver said. "My dad always said the best pieces have both." He shifted, uncomfortable with praise. "Anyway, there's something else. I called a friend who works at Burlington National Bank. They're looking for a part-time accounts manager, 3 days a week, decent pay, benefits after 90 days. If you're interested, I can set up an interview." Jasmine's breath caught. A real job. A chance. "Why are you doing all this?" Oliver was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because when Annabelle died, people helped me. Not with money or big gestures. Just possibilities. Chances to stand up again." He met her eyes. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs." "I'll need references," she said softly. "And I don't have a permanent address." "You have one for now." Oliver headed for the door, then paused. "And Jasmine, you've got references. You've been reorganizing my entire business for the past week." After he left, Jasmine sat in the rocking chair for a long time, one hand on her belly, the other tracing the grain of the cherry wood filing cabinet. Outside, the snow had stopped completely, revealing a world transformed. The sun broke through the clouds, making the fresh snow sparkle like scattered diamonds. She thought about Margaret's words about morning light, about Oliver's quiet offers of possibility, about Riley's berry smiles and shadow watching over her sleep. She thought about the baby growing inside her, about the chances she wanted to give him, about the kind of mother she wanted to be. Standing, she walked to her neatly folded stack of clothes. Among them was a creased envelope containing her few remaining documents, her ID, her work history, her certifications. She'd protected these papers through everything, keeping them as proof that she was more than her circumstances. "What do you think, Ethan?" she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Should we take a chance?" The baby kicked in response, strong and sure. Jasmine smiled, remembering Margaret's words about letting yourself belong somewhere. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let the morning light in. The Burlington National Bank lobby gleamed with polished marble and old money confidence. Jasmine sat straight-backed in a leather chair, wearing a borrowed maternity dress from Margaret's church friend and her own carefully polished thrift store boots. Her resume, printed on Oliver's workshop printer, felt thin in her hands. Miss Carter, the hiring manager, Andrea Mills, emerged from her office. "Shall I please come in?" Jasmine rose carefully, one hand supporting her 7-month belly. As she followed Andrea into the office, she remembered Oliver's words from that morning. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." The interview started traditionally enough. Questions about experience, software knowledge, organizational skills. Jasmine felt herself relaxing as she explained her previous work in administration, her eyes lighting up as she described her filing systems and accounting methods. "I have to ask," Andrea said finally, setting down her notes. "Oliver Bennett isn't known for giving recommendations. He's done exactly 2 in 15 years, both for long-term employees, yet he called me personally about you." Jasmine's throat tightened. "I've been helping with his workshop accounts. For a week." Andrea's eyes were kind but shrewd. "Tell me the real story, Jasmine." The moment stretched between them. Jasmine thought about lying, about crafting a neat story that would fit on her resume. Instead, she touched her breathed tattoo and chose truth. "I was homeless," she said quietly. "The Bennetts took me in during the storm. I've been organizing Oliver's business accounts to repay their kindness. I'm good at what I do, Mrs. Mills. My circumstances changed, but my skills and work ethic didn't." Andrea was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled. 3 days a week to start. Benefits after 90 days, as discussed. "When can you begin?" Jasmine blinked. "Just like that. Just like that." Andrea stood, extending her hand. "Oliver Bennett doesn't give recommendations lightly. And anyone who can organize that man's chaos of a filing system can handle our accounts." Outside the bank, Jasmine stood in the winter sunshine, her acceptance letter clutched to her chest. Real work, real income, real chance to build something for Ethan. The baby kicked, as if celebrating with her. She was so lost in the moment that she almost missed Oliver's truck idling at the curb. He rolled down the window, looking somewhat sheepish. "Thought you might want a ride home." "You waited?" Jasmine climbed into the passenger seat, the heater's warmth welcome after the cold. "Had some errands to run anyway." Oliver pulled into traffic, his hand steady on the wheel. "How'd it go?" "I got it." The words felt surreal. "I start next week." Oliver's smile was quick but genuine. Never doubted it. They drove in comfortable silence until Jasmine asked, "Why did you do it?" Call Andrea, because you deserve a chance. He paused at a red light. And because I've seen what you can do. My accounts haven't been this organized since, well, ever. Back at the house, Riley burst out the front door before they'd even parked. Did you get it? Did you? Grandma said we couldn't have celebration cookies until we knew. Riley, June, Margaret called from the porch. Let them at least get out of the truck. But Riley was already bouncing around them, her excitement contagious. Daddy said you'd get it because you're the smartest person he knows except for Grandma. But Grandma says that's just because she's had more time to learn things and… Riley, Oliver interrupted, his ears slightly red. Remember what we said about indoor voice? They celebrated with Margaret's chocolate chip cookies and milk, Riley insisting on making another berry smile face on Jasmine's plate, because good news needs extra smiles. The normalcy of it all made Jasmine's chest ache in a way that wasn't entirely painful. Later that evening, she found Oliver in his workshop, sanding a table leg with careful strokes. The filing cabinet he'd made her stood proudly in the corner, already half filled with organized papers. I've been thinking, she said, watching him work, about your offer to help with the books here too. Oliver set down his sandpaper. And I'd like to, not for money, she added quickly, but as rent, until I find my own place. You don't need to, I want to. Jasmine stepped further into the workshop, breathing in the familiar scent of wood and varnish. I need to contribute, to have a purpose here. Oliver studied her for a long moment, sawdust catching in his hair like early snow. All right, he said finally. Partners? Partners. The word settled between them, comfortable and right. Through the workshop window, Jasmine could see Margaret and Riley in the kitchen, baking something that had Riley standing on her tiptoes to peer into the oven. She asks about you, Oliver said quietly, following her gaze. Go when you'll leave. Riley? Yeah. He picked up his sandpaper again, focusing on the wood grain. She's gotten attached. We all have. The admission hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jasmine watched his hands move over the wood, sure and steady. The same way he handled everything, with care, with purpose, with quiet strength. I'm not ready, she whispered, not sure if she meant for leaving or for staying or for the way her heart beat faster when he looked at her. No one's rushing you. Oliver's voice was gentle. You've got time. That night, Jasmine sat at her borrowed desk, making lists in her neat handwriting, budget plans, savings goals, apartment hunting strategies, everything organized, everything in its place, control in the midst of chaos. A soft knock interrupted her planning. Riley stood in the doorway in her unicorn pajamas, clutching a book. Can you read to me? Daddy's voice isn't right for the princess parts. Shouldn't you be in bed? I was waiting for you. Riley's lower lip trembled slightly. You weren't at dinner. Guilt tugged at Jasmine's heart. She'd been so caught up in planning her future, she'd missed the present moment. Come here, sweet girl. Riley climbed onto her lap, careful of her belly, and opened the book. They see, the princess in this one looks like you, strong and beautiful. Jasmine looked at the illustration, a dark-skinned princess standing tall despite her challenges. She thought about Andrea's kindness, Oliver's quiet support, Margaret's wisdom, and this child's pure acceptance. So once upon a time, she began reading, her voice soft in the evening quiet, there was a princess who thought she had to face everything alone. From the hallway came the sound of Oliver's footsteps, pausing briefly at the door. She didn't look up, but she felt his presence, steady as a heartbeat. Riley snuggled closer, one small hand resting on Jasmine's belly where Ethan kicked gently. Outside, snow began falling again. Not a storm this time, but soft flakes drifting like whispered promises. Jasmine read on, her voice growing stronger with each word, while somewhere deep inside, roots she hadn't planned for began to grow. 2 weeks into her new job at Burlington National Bank, Jasmine developed a morning ritual. She'd wake before sunrise, carefully apply the makeup Margaret had helped her select, and stand before the mirror practicing her professional smile. In the quiet darkness, she'd whisper affirmations to Ethan. We're making it, baby. We're really making it. This morning, however, her routine was interrupted by the sound of Oliver's truck refusing to start in the freezing dawn. Come on, she heard him mutter outside her window, followed by another unsuccessful attempt to turn over the engine. Riley had a morning dentist appointment, and Jasmine knew Oliver needed to get her there before heading to a client meeting. Without thinking too hard about it, Jasmine grabbed her coat and headed outside. The February air bit through her clothes as she approached the truck, where Oliver stood with the hood up, his breath forming clouds in the cold. "Try it again," she said, moving to study the engine. Oliver glanced at her, surprise flickering across his features. "You know about engines." "My grandfather was a mechanic." Jasmine leaned in, careful to keep her work clothes clean. "I spent summers in his shop. Try it one more time." The engine whined but wouldn't catch. Jasmine nodded, confirming her suspicion. "Starter's freezing up. There's a trick to it." She reached in with practiced hands, her fingers finding the right spot despite the years since she'd last done this. "Try now." The engine roared to life. Oliver stared at her with newfound appreciation. "Is there anything you can't do?" "Cook," Jasmine admitted, wiping her hands on a shop rag. "I burn water." A laugh escaped him, a real one, deep and unguarded. The sound made something warm unfurl in Jasmine's chest. Before either could speak again, Riley burst out of the house, her backpack covered in new unicorn stickers. "Miss Jasmine fixed the truck," she announced to Margaret, who stood in the doorway wrapped in her favorite cardigan. "She's like a magic mechanic princess." "Not quite magic," Jasmine said, smoothing Riley's hair. "Just experience. Can you teach me? I want to fix things like you and Daddy." Oliver checked his watch. "Maybe later, princess. We need to get you to Dr. Hudson." "I can take her," Jasmine found herself offering. "My first meeting isn't until 10. You need to get to your client." Oliver hesitated. "You sure?" "Of course she's sure," Margaret called from the porch. "And I'll come too. These old bones could use a morning out." And so Jasmine found herself driving Oliver's newly started truck through Burlington's morning traffic, Riley chattering in the back seat about which sticker the dentist might give her, Margaret knitting calmly beside her. The domesticity of it all struck her suddenly. How natural it felt. How right. At the dentist's office, Riley gripped Jasmine's hand tight. "Will it hurt?" "Just a cleaning, sweet girl." Jasmine knelt carefully, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Tell you what, you be brave for Dr. Hudson, and after work, I'll teach you about engines." "Deal." Riley's face lit up. "Deal." In the waiting room, Margaret set aside her knitting. "Are you good with her? She makes it easy." Jasmine watched through the office window as Riley followed the dental hygienist, walking tall despite her obvious nervousness. "She's special." "She is." Margaret's needles clicked softly as she resumed her work. "You know, Oliver was the same way at her age, scared of the dentist but too proud to admit it. Annabelle used to have to bribe him with promises of ice cream." The mention of Riley's mother didn't hurt like it used to. "Tell me about her." "Annabelle." Margaret smiled, her eyes distant with memory. She was sunshine in human form, always laughing, always moving. She taught kindergarten, you know. That's how they met. Oliver was building new cubbies for her classroom. She came in to check the progress and found him reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to himself to make sure the bookshelf was the right height for story time. Jasmine could picture it, Oliver's large frame hunched over a tiny chair, completely unself-conscious in his dedication to doing the job right. He loved her very much. "Yes." Margaret set her knitting down again, looking directly at Jasmine. "And she'd be happy, you know, seeing how he is with you." Before Jasmine could respond, Riley emerged proudly displaying her cavity-free sticker and a smile that sparkled from professional cleaning. The moment passed, but Margaret's words lingered. Later that day, during her lunch break at the bank, Jasmine reviewed her carefully planned budget. Her first paycheck had gone entirely to opening a savings account for Ethan. The second would help build an emergency fund. By summer, if she stayed on track, she could start looking for her own place. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought a complicated ache she wasn't ready to examine. Her phone buzzed with a text from Oliver. "Riley can't stop talking about her engine lesson. Fair warning, she's already picked out her future coveralls. Pink with unicorns." Jasmine smiled, typing back, "Of course they'll have unicorns." That evening, true to her promise, Jasmine sat with Riley in the workshop, using Oliver's tools to demonstrate basic engine parts on an old model he'd found for them. Oliver leaned against the doorframe, watching as his daughter absorbed every word with fierce concentration. "And this," Jasmine explained, pointing to a particular component, "is the starter. It's what we fixed this morning. The one that was too cold." Riley wrinkled her nose. "Like when I don't want to get out of bed." "Exactly like that." Jasmine caught Oliver's smile over Riley's head. "Sometimes things just need a little help to get going." After Riley's bedtime, Jasmine found herself back in the workshop, organizing receipts into her filing system. Oliver worked quietly beside her, the sound of his sanding as familiar now as her own heartbeat. Thank you, he said suddenly. For today, all of it. Jasmine looked up from her papers. I wanted to help. You do. Oliver set down his tools, turning to face her fully. You help every day. With Riley. With the business. With everything. The workshop felt smaller suddenly, the air heavy with things unsaid. Jasmine's heart pounded against her ribs as Oliver took a step closer. So I should go check those quarterly reports, she said quickly, gathering her papers. Early meeting tomorrow. Oliver stepped back immediately, respecting her retreat. Of course. Good night, Jasmine. In her room, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed, one hand pressed to her racing heart, the other cradling her belly where Ethan moved restlessly. Shadow the kitten watched from her perch on the nightstand, her button eyes knowing. What am I doing? Jasmine whispered to the quiet room. This isn't part of the plan. But plans, she was learning, had a way of changing, like the winter outside her window, slowly giving way to early spring, like the starter in Oliver's truck, sometimes needing a different approach, like her own heart, carefully protected for so long, beginning to thaw in ways she hadn't expected. She pulled out her planning notebook, turning to her carefully outlined future. The pages blurred as she remembered Riley's proud smile at the dentist, Margaret's knowing eyes, Oliver's quiet, "You help every day." For the first time since she'd started making lists, Jasmine closed the notebook without adding to it. Sometimes she was learning. The most important things couldn't be planned. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in its plain white envelope but carrying the weight of an avalanche. Jasmine recognized the law firm's name immediately. She'd worked there briefly before everything fell apart. Her hands trembled as she opened it at the kitchen table, Margaret's fresh coffee growing cold beside her. "Child?" Margaret's voice seemed to come from far away. "You've gone pale." Jasmine forced herself to breathe, one hand instinctively protective over her 8-month belly. The letter was brief but devastating. Ethan's father had learned of her whereabouts and was asserting his parental rights. He wanted a DNA test. He wanted custody arrangements. He wanted back into a life he'd abandoned. "He can't," Jasmine whispered, more to herself than to Margaret. "He has no right." Margaret gently took the letter, reading it with growing concern. "Does Oliver know about him? Only that he's not in the picture." Jasmine's voice sounded hollow to her own ears. "I never told. I should have said, 'Hush now.'" Margaret's arm came around her shoulders. "First things first. We'll call Andrea at the bank, tell her you're taking a personal day. Then we'll figure this out." But Jasmine was already standing, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need to go." I can't bring this into your lives." "Jasmine Alyssa Carter." Margaret's voice cracked like summer lightning. "Don't you dare run from people who love you." The word love stopped Jasmine in her tracks. She sank back into her chair, tears finally breaking free. "I didn't tell you everything. About him. About why I left." "Then tell us now." Oliver's voice from the doorway made both women turn. He stood there in his work clothes, sawdust still in his hair, his face set with concern. Riley, thankfully, had already left for school. Jasmine looked between them, Margaret with her unwavering support, Oliver with his quiet strength, and felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. "His name is William Caldwell," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I told him I was pregnant the first time, he seemed happy. We were planning a wedding. But then," her hand went to her wrist, to the breathed tattoo that marked her first loss. "When I lost the baby, he changed, became controlling, said I'd failed him." Oliver's hands gripped the back of a kitchen chair, his knuckles white. Margaret's arm tightened around Jasmine's shoulders. "When I got pregnant with Ethan, I knew I had to leave. William had started drinking, getting violent with words, then with actions. Small things at first, breaking dishes, punching walls. Then one night," Jasmine's voice caught, "he pushed me. I caught myself, protected my belly, but I knew I had to go." "Did you report him?" Oliver's voice was carefully controlled. "I tried. His family has connections in Albany. The report disappeared." Jasmine wiped her eyes. "So I disappeared instead. Came north, worked odd jobs. Stayed moving until the storm brought you here," Margaret finished softly. Oliver pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Lydia Winters." "The lawyer?" Margaret asked. "Best family court attorney in Vermont. She helped my cousin keep her kids in a custody battle last year." He looked at Jasmine. "If you want her help." Jasmine stared at him. this man who offered solutions instead of judgment. I can't afford. You can pay her back when you're settled. He cut her off gently. Right now, let's focus on protecting you and Ethan. The name of her unborn son on Oliver's lips broke something loose in Jasmine's chest. A sob escaped her, then another. Margaret held her while Oliver made the call, his deep voice a reassuring rumble in the background. When she could breathe again, Jasmine found Oliver kneeling beside her chair. Lydia can see you this afternoon. I'll drive you. But your client meeting can wait. His blue-grey eyes held hers. You're more important. The drive to Lydia's office was quiet, snow falling softly outside. Jasmine's hand rested on her belly, feeling Ethan's movements. Beside her, Oliver drove with careful attention, occasionally glancing her way as if to assure himself she was still there. I should have told you, she said finally. About William. About all of it. You told us when you were ready. Oliver's hands were steady on the wheel. That's what matters. Lydia Winter's office was warm and welcoming, with plants in every window and children's drawings on the walls. The lawyer herself was a striking woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes that hardened when Jasmine shared her story. He has no basis for custody, Lydia declared, after reviewing the letter. Given his history of domestic violence and the fact that he abandoned you during the pregnancy, we can petition for sole custody. We'll need documentation, medical records, witness statements, anything you have from before. I kept everything, Jasmine admitted. In a safety deposit box in Albany. I was afraid to access it in case he was watching the bank. Smart girl. Lydia made notes on her tablet. We can have those records retrieved legally. And your current situation? Employment? Housing? She has both, Oliver spoke up. Permanent position at Burlington National, full benefits, and a stable living situation. Lydia's eyebrow rose slightly as she looked between them. I see. And your relationship is friends, Jasmine said quickly, even as her heart stuttered at the word. The Bennetts took me in during the storm. They've been their family, Oliver echoed softly. Later, after Lydia had outlined their legal strategy and set things in motion, Jasmine and Oliver stood in the parking lot as snow dusted their shoulders. Thank you, Jasmine said, meaning for more than just the ride or the lawyer. Oliver brushed snow from her coat with gentle hands. You don't have to thank family. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jasmine looked up at him. This man who built beautiful things with his hands, who read stories to his daughter, who offered help without demanding anything in return. Oliver, she started, not sure what she meant to say. Dad, Miss Jasmine. Riley's voice cut through the snow-muffled air. Margaret's car pulled up, Riley waving frantically from the back seat. Grandma picked me up early and said we're having comfort food for dinner, which means mac and cheese, and also I lost another tooth. Just like that. The moment shifted, reality reasserting itself. But as they drove home, Oliver's truck following Margaret's car through the snowy streets, Jasmine felt something settle in her heart. The letter that morning had terrified her, made her want to run, but for the first time in her life, she had something stronger than fear. She had family. That evening, after Riley was asleep, Jasmine found Oliver in his workshop. He was carving something small and intricate, his hands sure despite the delicate work. What are you making? She asked. He held it up, a wooden pendant, a tiny, perfect rose beginning to emerge from the maple. For you, a reminder of what? That some things, once they start growing, can't be stopped. He set down his tools, looking at her directly. But no matter what happens with William, you're not alone anymore. You or Ethan. Jasmine touched the carved rose, feeling the smooth petals under her fingertips. I'm starting to believe that. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Burlington in a fresh blanket of white. But inside the workshop, surrounded by the scent of wood and possibility, Jasmine felt warmth bloom in her chest. William's letter had threatened to destroy her newfound peace, but instead, it had revealed something powerful. She wasn't just staying with the Bennetts anymore. She was home. The Albany bank records arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by courier to Lydia Winter's office. Jasmine sat at the conference table, Oliver a steady presence beside her as the lawyer spread out years of carefully preserved documentation. Some medical records from the first pregnancy. Lydia sorted through the papers. Hospital reports from the night he pushed you. Bank statements showing his gambling debts. Police report that disappeared. You kept a copy. Very thorough, Jasmine. I had to be. Jasmine's hand went to her wooden rose pendant, a habit that had replaced touching her tattoo. William's family made things vanish. I needed proof I wasn't crazy. Oliver's hand tightened on the armrest of his chair, but he remained silent. He'd been like this since the records arrived, protective but contained, as if afraid his anger at William might somehow spill over and frighten her. The evidence is compelling, Lydia continued, especially combined with witness statements from your former co-workers at the law firm. William Caldwell may have connections, but he left a trail. Will it be enough? Jasmine asked, her other hand cradling her belly. At 8.5 months, Ethan's movements were strong enough to be visible through her sweater, more than enough for a restraining order. As for custody, Lydia was interrupted by her phone buzzing. She checked the message, her expression darkening. He's here, in Burlington. The room seemed to tilt. Oliver was immediately on his feet, but Jasmine grabbed his arm. Don't, he's not getting anywhere near you. No, Lydia agreed, already dialing her phone. He's not. Judge Warner owes me a favor. We'll have the emergency restraining order within the hour. Where's Riley today? School, Oliver answered. Mom's picking her up. Good. Call her. Tell her to take Riley straight home and lock the doors. I'm having the order delivered to William's hotel with a police escort. Lydia's voice was crisp, professional. Jasmine, you'll stay here until it's served. Oliver, your choice. I'm staying. He sat back down, closer this time. The next hour passed in a blur of legal activity. Lydia's staff moved with practiced efficiency. Papers were signed, calls were made. Through it all, Jasmine felt strangely calm. This wasn't like last time, when she'd run in fear and confusion. Now she had allies, resources, strength. Orders been served, Lydia announced finally. He can't come within 500 feet of you, the bank, the Bennett home, or Riley's school. He knows about Riley? Jasmine's calm cracked. He's been asking questions around town. Lydia's face softened, but he can't touch her. The order covers the entire household. The drive home was tense, Oliver taking a longer route to ensure they weren't followed. When they finally pulled up to the Blue House, Margaret and Riley were waiting on the porch, a plate of fresh cookies releasing steam into the cold air. You're just in time. Riley bounced down the steps. Grandma let me help with the chocolate chips, and I only ate 3 while baking. Jasmine hugged her close, breathing in the scent of chocolate and childhood innocence. Over Riley's head, she met Margaret's eyes and saw understanding there. The older woman had lived through her own battles, had her own stories of standing ground. Later that evening, after Riley was asleep, Jasmine found herself in Oliver's workshop. He was sanding a cradle, the project he'd been working on in secret for weeks, though they both pretended she didn't know. I keep thinking about running, she admitted, watching his hands move over the wood. It would be easier. Oliver set down his tools. Easier isn't always right. No. She touched the curved edge of the cradle. But staying is terrifying. More terrifying than being alone. The question hung in the air between them. Jasmine thought about the past months. Riley's morning hugs, Margaret's quiet wisdom, Oliver's unwavering support. No, she whispered. Not anymore. He stepped closer, sawdust catching the workshop lights like gold in his hair. I want to ask you something, and I need you to know you can say no. Jasmine's heart stuttered. Oliver, move in permanently. The words rushed out like he'd been holding them back. Not as a guest, not temporarily. Make this your home, yours and Ethan's. We can convert the den into a proper bedroom, give you your own space. Riley would be over the moon. Mom already thinks of you as a daughter. And He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I sleep better knowing you're here. Safe. Tears spilled down Jasmine's cheeks. You don't owe me this. This isn't about owing. Oliver's voice was rough with emotion. This is about family. About choice. He broke off as his phone buzzed. The text was from Lydia. William violated the order, tried to approach the house. Police picked him up. He's in custody. Jasmine felt the world spin, but Oliver's arms were there, steady and strong. She leaned into him without thinking, her face pressed against his chest where she could hear his heart racing. He can't hurt you, Oliver murmured into her hair. Not anymore. I know. And she did know with a certainty that surprised her. William had seemed so powerful once, his anger and control consuming her world. But here, in this workshop that smelled of sawdust and possibility, with this man who built beautiful things and loved with his whole heart, William seemed smaller, less real. A knock at the workshop door revealed Margaret, her silver hair gleaming in the evening light. Riley's asking for you, Jasmine. Says she can't sleep without a story from her bonus mom. The term, one Riley had started using after overhearing it at school, usually made Jasmine's heart ache with complicated emotions. Tonight, it felt like permission. "About your offer," she said to Oliver. "The den conversion. Yes? Could we paint it yellow? For the morning light?" Oliver's smile was like sunrise. "Found any color you want." That night, after reading Riley 3 stories and checking the locks twice, Jasmine stood at her bedroom window. Snow was falling again, but unlike that first night under the store awning, she wasn't alone in the cold. Ethan kicked strongly, making her smile. "I know, baby," she whispered. "We're finally where we're supposed to be." In her mind, she began rearranging her careful plans. The apartment search could wait. The savings could go toward making the den into a proper nursery. And maybe, just maybe, the wall she'd built around her heart could come down brick by brick. Outside her door, she heard Oliver's familiar tread in the hallway, his nightly check of the house before bed. The sound, once strange, now felt like a lullaby, like home, like love, growing quiet and strong as a wooden rose blooming in careful hands. March arrived like a lion, bringing with it howling winds and Jasmine's final weeks of pregnancy. The den's transformation into a nursery was nearly complete, its walls now a soft yellow that seemed to hold sunlight even on cloudy days. Oliver had installed the window seat himself, crafting it with the same care he'd given the cradle that waited, ready, in the corner. "Just a few more weeks, Doctor," Martinez said during Jasmine's latest checkup, Margaret holding her hand while they watched the ultrasound screen. "Ethan's in perfect position." Perfect position. Jasmine thought about those words later that evening as she folded tiny onesies in the nursery. Everything was in position now, her job secure, William's attempts at contact thwarted by Lydia's legal maneuvering, her place in the Bennett household no longer temporary, but permanent. So why did she feel like she was holding her breath? "Miss Jasmine." Riley's voice pulled her from her thoughts. The girl stood in the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. "Can I show you something? It's for art class." "Of course, sweet girl." Jasmine patted the window seat beside her. Riley climbed up, careful as always of Jasmine's belly. The paper she held showed a crayon drawing of 5 figures in front of a blue house. "It's our family," she explained. "See? There's Daddy and me and Grandma and you and baby Ethan." She pointed to the smallest figure, colored in bright yellow. "I made him yellow like his room." Jasmine stared at the picture, her throat tight. "Your teacher didn't mind having me in the family drawing. She said families come in lots of different ways." Riley leaned against Jasmine's side. "Like how Katie has 2 mommies, and Miguel lives with his grandparents, and I have a bonus mom who fixes trucks and tells the best stories." Before Jasmine could respond, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen. She gasped, grabbing the window seat's edge. Riley sat up straight. "Is Ethan coming? Should I get Daddy? Daddy!" "Riley, wait!" But the girl was already running, her voice carrying through the house. Oliver appeared moments later, slightly out of breath. "What's wrong?" "Probably nothing." Jasmine tried to sound calm. "Just a contraction. I'm not due for 2 more weeks." Another pain hit, stronger this time. Oliver was beside her instantly, his hand steady on her back. "That was fast. How long between?" "I don't know, I wasn't timing." She broke off as her water broke, soaking the window seat cushion. "Right." Oliver's voice shifted into decisive mode. "Mom, call Dr. Martinez." "Riley, get Miss Jasmine's hospital bag, the blue one by her door. I'll bring the truck around." "No." Jasmine grabbed his arm. "William, he's been watching the house. If we take the truck." "Already handled," Margaret called from the hallway. "Lydia's sending a police escort. And look who just pulled up." Through the nursery window, Jasmine saw Andrea Mills from the bank, parking her SUV. "I called her," Margaret explained. "I thought you might want another woman with you, since I need to stay with Riley." Everything moved quickly after that. Andrea's SUV, flanked by police cars, wound through Burlington's streets, while Oliver held Jasmine's hand through each contraction. They grew stronger, closer together, her carefully planned 2 weeks dissolving into now. "Someone's eager to meet his family," Andrea said from the driver's seat. Family. The word echoed in Jasmine's mind as another contraction gripped her. She squeezed Oliver's hand, remembering Riley's crayon drawing. Yellow for hope, blue for home. The hospital lights were too bright, the nurses' voices too loud. Dr. Martinez met them in the delivery room, her calm presence an anchor in the storm of activity. Let's meet this baby. Hours blurred together. Jasmine lost track of time, aware only of the rhythm of contractions and Oliver's steady presence. He never left her side, not when she crushed his hand, not when she cried that she couldn't do it, not when she whispered her deepest fear. "What if I'm not ready?" "You are," he murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest person I know." "Almost there," Dr. Martinez encouraged. "One more big push." Jasmine gathered her strength, thinking of everything that had led to this moment. The cold night under the awning, Margaret's soup, Riley's stuffed kitten, Oliver's wooden rose. She pushed, feeling something shift and change forever. Ethan's first cry filled the room at 3:47 a.m. on a stormy March morning. They placed him on her chest, perfect and red-faced and absolutely beautiful. "Say hello, baby," she whispered, counting his fingers, his toes, memorizing every detail of his face. "You're finally here." Oliver touched Ethan's dark curls with trembling fingers. "He's incredible." His voice cracked. "You're incredible." A commotion in the hallway broke the moment. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Oliver straightened, moving to the door, but it burst open before he reached it. William stood there, wild-eyed and desperate. "Oh, that's my son." Behind him, security guards approached cautiously. Jasmine pulled Ethan closer, her body curling protectively around him. But before William could take another step, Oliver was there, a wall between them and danger. "Your son?" Oliver's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of mountains. "Where were you during the doctor's appointments? The midnight cravings? The birthing classes? Where were you when she needed prenatal vitamins, or when her feet were swollen, or when she cried remembering what you did to her?" William faltered. "I have rights. You had responsibilities first." Oliver didn't move, didn't raise his voice, and you walked away from them. That was your choice. Now make another one. Walk away again. But this time, stay gone. Security reached them then, along with Lydia, who must have been called when William was spotted. "Mr. Caldwell," she said crisply, "let's discuss the additional charges you've just earned yourself." They led William away, his protests fading down the hall. Oliver turned back to Jasmine and Ethan, his face softening. "You okay?" Jasmine looked at him, really looked at him. This man who built things, who loved quietly but completely, who had become her shelter in every storm. "We're perfect," she said softly. "We're home." Understanding bloomed in Oliver's eyes. He crossed the room in 2 strides, perching carefully on the edge of her bed. Together, they watched Ethan yawn, his tiny fist wrapping around Oliver's finger. Outside, the March storm raged on. But inside this room, surrounded by the love she'd never thought she'd find, Jasmine felt nothing but peace. She touched her wooden rose pendant, thinking of Riley's crayon drawing waiting at home. Yellow for hope, blue for home. And now, finally, all the colors of love. 1 year later, on a crisp January evening, Jasmine stood under the awning of the closed storefront where her journey had begun. The winter wind still cut through Burlington's streets, but this time she wore a warm coat that fit properly, and her hands were wrapped in soft mittens that Margaret had knitted for Christmas. "This is it?" Riley asked, her hand warm in Jasmine's. That's 6 how she was taller now, though she still wore light-up shoes and covered everything she owned in stickers. "This is it," Jasmine confirmed. "Right here is where your daddy first saw me." Ethan squirmed in Oliver's arms, reaching for his mother. At 10 months old, he was a perfect blend of Jasmine's features and his own unique spirit, curious, determined, and completely beloved by his family. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Oliver said softly, passing Ethan to Jasmine. His wedding ring caught the streetlight, matching the one on Jasmine's finger. They'd married in the fall, a small ceremony in the backyard where Riley had been both flower girl and self-proclaimed official sister announcer. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Jasmine replied, bouncing Ethan gently. "Sometimes it feels like another lifetime." They'd come here for a reason, a tradition Margaret had suggested they start. Once a year, on the anniversary of that stormy night, they would remember where their family's story began, not to dwell on the past, but to appreciate how far they'd come. "Can we go to the diner now?" Riley asked, practical as always. "Grandma's saving our booth." The diner was warm and bright, smelling of coffee and fresh pie. Margaret waited in their usual corner booth, already armed with hot chocolate for Riley and decaf for the adults. Ethan's high chair sat ready at the end of the table, a recent and permanent addition. "There's my loves," Margaret greeted them. She looked exactly the same as she had a year ago, except perhaps for the extra glow of contentment that came from having a full house again. As they settled into their seats, Jasmine caught glimpses of their reflection in the diner window, no longer separate individuals, but a family unit, comfortable with each other in a way that only time and love could create. The past year had brought changes, both big and small. William had finally backed down after Lydia's legal maneuvering, and Oliver's unwavering presence made it clear he couldn't win. The restraining order became permanent, and Ethan's custody was secured firmly in Jasmine's name. The den-turned-nursery had evolved into a proper bedroom for Ethan, though he still slept in the cradle Oliver had made when he was particularly fussy. Riley had appointed herself official big sister, reading stories to Ethan every night and teaching him essential skills like how to make silly faces. Oliver's business had grown, with Jasmine's organizational skills helping to transform it from a one-man workshop into a thriving custom furniture studio. She still worked at the bank 3 days a week, but now she managed Oliver's books too, finding satisfaction in building something together. "Remember your first night with us?" Margaret asked, helping Riley arrange her napkin. "You were so determined to leave in the morning." "I was scared," Jasmine admitted, watching Ethan investigate a plastic spoon with serious concentration. "Not of you, but of hoping, of letting myself believe in something good." Oliver's hand found hers under the table. "And now I believe in everything." She smiled at Riley, who was attempting to teach Ethan the fine art of straw wrapper paperworm creation, in family, in second chances, in love that grows quiet and strong, like a wooden rose, Oliver finished, touching the pendant she still wore. He'd carved matching ones for Riley and Ethan, creating a small forest of wooden flowers that bloomed eternally on their dresser at home. "You know what I believe in," Riley announced, her straw wrapper worm impressively long. "I believe in bonus moms who fix trucks and tell stories, and baby brothers who drool but are still cute, and daddies who build things, and grandmas who make the best hot chocolate and know everything." "Everything?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Not quite everything, sweet girl, but I know love when I see it. And this family. This is the real thing." Later that night, after Riley had finally fallen asleep after 3 stories and 2 glasses of water, after Ethan had been tucked into his cradle with Shadow the kitten standing guard nearby, Jasmine and Oliver stood in his workshop. The space had expanded over the year, but it still smelled of sawdust and possibility. "Working on something new?" Jasmine asked, noticing the sketches on his workbench. "A rocking chair," Oliver replied, showing her the design. "For the front porch, big enough for 2, maybe 3, if a certain little boy wants to hear stories." Jasmine traced the curved lines of the sketch. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful!" Oliver pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "Every morning I wake up grateful for that storm that brought you to us." "Just the storm?" she teased, remembering their wedding vows where he'd thanked not just the storm, but also his truck's stubborn starter, Riley's endless questions, and Margaret's soup. "Everything," he murmured against her hair. "Every moment, every choice, every step that led us here." Through the workshop window, they could see fresh snow beginning to fall, but unlike that night a year ago, Jasmine felt only peace watching it. Snow meant cozy evenings now, family movies and Margaret's hot chocolate, Riley's excitement and Ethan's wonder at the white world outside. "We should head in," Oliver said softly. "Early morning tomorrow." Jasmine lingered in his embrace. "Riley has show and tell. She's taking the wooden rose collection to teach her class about different kinds of family trees." Oliver laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet workshop. "Trust our girl to turn flowers into trees." Our girl. The words settled in Jasmine's heart, like seeds taking root. Upstairs, Ethan made a small sound in his sleep, and Riley mumbled something about unicorn mechanics. Margaret's light was still on, probably knitting by the window as she did most nights. This was her family, not by blood or by law initially, but by choice, by love, by the steady accumulation of moments, small kindnesses, shared laughter, weathered storms, and quiet triumphs. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Jasmine thought about that desperate woman she'd been, standing alone in the cold. She wished she could tell her younger self that everything would be okay, that she would find not just shelter but home, not just safety but love, not just survival but life, rich and full and overflowing. "What are you thinking about?" Oliver asked as they reached the porch. Jasmine looked at their blue house, warm light spilling from its windows, the big tree in the yard sparkling with snow. She touched her wooden rose pendant and smiled. I'm thinking about how some nights change everything, how sometimes the worst storm leads you exactly where you need to be. She squeezed his hand. I'm thinking about home. Oliver leaned down and kissed her softly, snowflakes catching in his hair. Above them, the winter stars shone bright and clear, watching over the house where love had bloomed from the seeds of kindness, growing strong and true as a rose carved by careful hands. 5 years later, the backyard of the blue house bloomed with laughter and sunlight. Under the old oak tree, Oliver's workshop had expanded into a proper studio, its windows open to catch the summer breeze. Inside, 5-year-old Ethan stood on his tiptoes at the workbench, his tongue stuck out in concentration as he carefully sanded a small piece of wood. Like this, Daddy? He asked, his dark curls dusted with sawdust. Perfect, buddy. Oliver guided his son's hands with gentle patience. Nice and smooth, just like we practiced. 11-year-old Riley sat at her own workbench nearby, putting the finishing touches on her latest creation, a wooden nameplate for her bedroom door, complete with carved unicorns. Her apprenticeship in the family business had started with simple projects, but she'd inherited her father's gift for woodworking and her bonus mom's determination. Mom! Ethan called out as Jasmine appeared in the doorway. Look what I'm making. Another rose for the garden, Jasmine asked, running her fingers through his curls to dislodge the sawdust. The wooden rose garden had become their signature, a family tradition that started with Oliver's first gift to Jasmine and grew with each milestone. Riley had carved her first rose when she graduated elementary school. Ethan was determined to make one for his first day of kindergarten in the fall. Margaret sat in her favorite chair on the porch, overseeing the scene while working on a baby blanket. Her newest great-grandchild was due in the winter. Riley's cousin had moved to Burlington last year, adding another branch to their ever-growing family tree. Remember when you thought this workshop was too quiet? Margaret called to Oliver. So now we can barely hear ourselves think. Wouldn't have it any other way, Mum. Jasmine smiled, touching the original wooden rose she still wore. Her office at the bank had a whole shelf of carved roses now, each marking a different chapter in their story. The day she became branch manager, the day they officially adopted Riley, Ethan's first steps, each one perfect in its own way. They still visited the old storefront every January, teaching their children about beginnings and endings, about hope and family and love that grows stronger with time. Riley had written a school essay about it last year, titled How a Snowstorm Built My Family, which now hung framed in their living room. Hey, Mum! Riley set down her carving tools. Can we tell Ethan the story tonight, about how you came to us? Again? Ethan bounced with excitement. The one with the snow and the soup and Daddy's broken truck. That's the one, sweet boy. Jasmine gathered both children close, breathing in the scent of sawdust and childhood. Although the truck wasn't really broken, it just needed someone to help it remember how to start. Like how you helped us remember how to be a whole family, Riley said softly, wise beyond her years. Oliver joined them, wrapping his arms around all three. Outside, Margaret hummed Moon River as she knitted, the same song that had played at Jasmine and Oliver's wedding. The wooden rose garden grew larger each year, a testament to love that bloomed despite winter storms, that took root in fertile soil, that flourished with care and patience and time. Each rose unique, each one perfect, each one telling part of a story that began on a cold January night when a woman sought shelter and found home instead. And in the heart of Burlington, Vermont, the blue house with the big tree stood strong and sure, its windows warm with light, its rooms full of laughter, its foundation built on the strongest material of all, love that grows quiet and true, like roses carved by careful hands. The end. Based on this emotional story about love, overcoming and family, I have an impactful question for you. At one point in the story, Jasmine almost gave up everything and thought about running away when William showed up with the letter demanding custody of Ethan. However, Margaret stopped her by saying, "Don't you dare run away from the people who love you." If you were in Jasmine's shoes, with a painful past and finally finding a new family, what would your decision be at that crucial moment? Follow your protective instinct and run away to protect your baby, or rely on the love and support of the Bennett family to face your fears? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. Abandoned businessman wakes up from coma, in love with nurse who looked after him. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The steady beeping of medical monitors filled the sterile hospital room. Cassian Daniel Rhodes lay motionless, his tall frame appearing smaller against the white sheets. His dark brown hair, now touched with silver at the temples, contrasted sharply with the paleness of his skin. 3 months had passed since the accident. 3 months of stillness, of waiting, of a world moving on without him. Dr. Anderson stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing charts with practiced efficiency. "His vitals are improving," she noted to the nurse beside her. "We might see changes soon." Brenda Elise Carter nodded, her dark eyes studying the patient's face with professional concern. As the head nurse assigned to his case, she'd spent countless hours in this room, monitoring, caring, watching for any sign of consciousness. Her practical braids were pulled back neatly, and her comfortable yet professional attire spoke of someone who prioritized function over fashion. "I'll stay with him for a while," Brenda said, settling into the chair beside the bed. Dr. Anderson left, and the room fell into its familiar quiet, broken only by the rhythmic sounds of machinery. Brenda had learned much about Cassian Rhodes over these months, though they'd never spoken a word. She knew him from the news, of course, the successful business executive from Seattle, known for his razor-sharp deals and relentless work ethic. But she'd also learned about him from the steady decline in visitors, from the way his supposed friends gradually stopped coming, from how his fiancée's visits grew shorter and more infrequent until they ceased altogether. "You know," Brenda spoke softly, checking his IV line, "sometimes I think we learn more about people when they're silent than when they're speaking." She adjusted his blanket with practiced care. "Your silence has told quite a story, Mr. Rhodes." A slight movement caught her attention, a twitch of his fingers barely perceptible. Brenda leaned forward, her trained eyes scanning for any other signs of consciousness. There, another movement, this time more definite. "Mr. Rhodes," she called, pressing the alert button. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, struggling against the weight of months of sleep. Brenda dimmed the lights quickly, knowing the sensitivity he would experience. "Take your time," she encouraged, her voice steady and calm. "You're safe. You're in the hospital." When his eyes finally opened, they were a clouded blue-gray, confused and unfocused. Brenda positioned herself where he could see her clearly. "I'm Nurse Carter. You've been in a coma for 3 months following an accident. Try not to speak yet. Just blink once, if you understand me." A slow, deliberate blink. "Good," she smiled warmly. "That's very good. I'm going to ask you some simple questions. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Are you in any pain?" 2 blinks. "Are you thirsty?" 1 blink. As she helped him with small sips of water, Brenda noticed how his eyes, though still clouded with confusion, followed her movements with increasing awareness. She'd seen many patients wake from comas, but something about his gaze, the vulnerability, the raw humanity replacing the polished exterior she'd seen in news photos, struck a chord within her. The next hours were a whirlwind of medical checks, neurological tests and careful monitoring. Cassian drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening longer than the last. Brenda stayed nearby, providing a constant presence as different doctors came and went, as tests were performed, as his new reality slowly took shape around him. It wasn't until evening that he managed his first words, raspy and weak. "What happened?" Brenda moved closer to his bedside. "You were in a car accident," she explained gently. "Your vehicle was hit by a drunk driver on Highway 99. You've been here at Seattle General ever since." His face contorted with effort as memories began to surface. "Andrea," Brenda hesitated, knowing he was asking about his fiancée. "Would you like me to contact her for you?" A shadow passed over his face. Perhaps some part of him already knew. He closed his eyes, swallowing hard. When he opened them again, they were clearer, more focused and filled with a pain that had nothing to do with physical injuries. "No," he whispered. Brenda nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. She'd seen Andrea's last visit 2 months ago, watched her remove the engagement ring and place it on the bedside table with a note. The ring and note were now safely stored with his other personal effects. "Right now," Brenda said firmly but kindly, "your only job is to focus on healing. Everything else can wait." She adjusted his pillows with practiced ease. "Small steps, Mr. Rhodes, that's how we'll do this." He studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for something. Whatever he found there seemed to reassure him, because some of the tension left his shoulders. "Cassian," he managed. "Please call me Cassian." "All right, Cassian," she smiled, checking his IV one last time. "I'm Brenda, and I'll be here to help you with those small steps." As night settled over Seattle, Brenda watched him drift off to sleep, a natural sleep this time, not the heavy stillness of a coma. Outside the window, city lights twinkled against the dark sky, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Just another night in the city. But for the man in room 412, it was the beginning of a new chapter. Brenda touched the old ring that hung from a chain around her neck, her grandmother's wedding band, a reminder of resilience and love that had survived hard times. Something about Cassian's awakening, about the raw honesty in his eyes when he'd asked about Andrea, about the quiet dignity with which he'd accepted the unspoken truth, resonated deeply within her. As she finished her notes in his chart, Brenda found herself hoping that this patient, unlike so many others, would find more than just physical healing within these hospital walls. Sometimes, she'd learned, the deepest wounds were the ones that left no visible scars. The night shift nurse arrived to take over, and Brenda gathered her things to leave. At the door she paused, looking back at her sleeping patient. In the dim light, with his defenses stripped away by circumstance, he looked different from the powerful executive in the news photos. He looked simply human. "Good night, Cassian," she whispered, and quietly closed the door behind her. Dawn crept through the hospital windows, painting shadows across Cassian's room. He'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of his life. The doctors had warned him about memory gaps, a common occurrence after severe trauma, but what troubled him most weren't the memories he'd lost, but the ones that remained crystal clear. The door opened quietly, and Brenda entered, carrying her morning charts. She noticed immediately that he was awake. "You're up early," she observed, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. "Never was much good at sleeping in," Cassian replied, his voice stronger than the day before but still rough around the edges. He attempted to push himself up, grimacing at the effort. "Here." Brenda moved to adjust his bed, her movements precise and professional. "Today's going to be busy. Physical therapy starts this morning, and Dr. Anderson wants to run a few cognitive tests." Cassian nodded, then caught sight of his reflection in the window. Gaunt, pale, with a beard he'd never worn before. His hand instinctively went to his face, fingers tracing the unfamiliar growth. "We can help you with that," Brenda offered, noting his discomfort. "Would you like to clean up a bit before therapy?" "Please," he said, the single word carrying the weight of his pride. Brenda gathered the necessary supplies, a basin of warm water, shaving cream, a safety razor. She'd done this countless times for other patients, but something about Cassian's quiet dignity made this moment feel different. "I can manage," he insisted, reaching for the razor. "I'm sure you can," Brenda replied calmly, "but let's not rush things. Your motor skills need time to recover." She met his frustrated gaze with steady understanding. Sometimes accepting help is harder than offering it. The truth in her words seemed to reach him. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and he gave a small nod. As Brenda worked, her movements gentle but sure, Cassian gradually settled into the vulnerable intimacy of being cared for. "Tell me about the accident," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Brenda's hands remained steady, though her heart clenched at the request. "It happened on a Tuesday night," she began, carefully wiping shaving cream from his jaw. "A drunk driver ran a red light on Highway 99. Your car was hit on the driver's side. The emergency team had to cut you out of the vehicle. And the other driver, minor injuries. He was arrested at the scene." Brenda paused, studying his expression. "He's serving time now." Cassian absorbed this information in silence. When he spoke again, his voice was distant. "I was supposed to be at a dinner meeting that night. Big merger deal." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Funny how none of that seems important now." "Perspective has a way of shifting when we least expect it," Brenda replied, finishing the last stroke of the razor. She handed him a warm towel and a small mirror. Looking at his cleaned-up reflection, Cassian seemed to recognize himself a bit more. "Thank you," he said softly, and Brenda understood he meant for more than just the shave. The physical therapist, Devin, arrived shortly after. He was a broad-shouldered man with an easy smile and patient demeanor. "Ready to get back on your feet, Mr. Rhodes." What followed was an hour of grueling basic exercises. Cassian, who had once prided himself on his physical fitness, found himself struggling with the simplest movements. Frustration radiated from him in waves, but he pressed on, jaw set with determination. Brenda stayed nearby, monitoring his vitals and offering quiet encouragement. She noticed how he twisted the ring on his finger, his father's ring she'd learned from his medical records, whenever the exercises became particularly challenging. "Remember," she said during a water break, "your body hasn't moved for 3 months. This is a marathon, not a sprint." "I used to run marathons," Cassian replied, breathless from the effort of simple leg lifts. "Actually ran Boston twice." "Then you understand pacing," Brenda smiled, handing him a fresh cup of water. "And you know that every finish line starts with a single step." As the morning progressed, more of Cassian's new reality began to sink in. Dr. Anderson arrived with test results and a lengthy recovery plan. Cognitive function seemed intact, but physical rehabilitation would take months. There would be daily therapy sessions, medications, and a complete lifestyle change. "What about work?" Cassian asked, though something in his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "Doctor." Anderson's expression was sympathetic but firm. "For now, focus on recovery. We'll discuss return-to-work timelines once you're stronger." After the doctor left, Cassian sat in silence, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline, the very skyline his office had once overlooked. Brenda watched as he unconsciously touched his ring again, turning it slowly. "Your father's?" she asked gently, nodding toward the ring. Cassian looked surprised, then understanding crossed his face. "Yes. He was a contractor, built houses his whole life, worked with his hands." He flexed his own fingers, still weak from disuse. "He used to say the truest measure of a man isn't what he owns, but what he builds." "Wise words," Brenda replied, checking his afternoon medications. "What did he think about your career choice?" "He died before I made partner," Cassian said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if he would have recognized the man I became." He paused, then added with a hint of self-deprecation, "Corner office, $1,000 suits, 80-hour weeks. And now?" "Now?" Cassian attempted to lift his water cup, hands shaking slightly. "Now I can barely hold a glass without help." Brenda stepped forward, steadying the cup without taking it from him. "But you're trying. That's what matters." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that went beyond patient and caregiver. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. A young nurse entered with lunch, breaking the spell. Brenda stepped back, resuming her professional demeanor. "Try to eat everything," she instructed, moving toward the door. "You'll need the strength for this afternoon's therapy session." "Brenda," Cassian called as she reached the doorway. When she turned, he offered a small but genuine smile. "Thank you. For earlier. For understanding." She nodded, returning his smile with one of her own. "Small steps, Cassian. We'll get there." As she walked down the hospital corridor, Brenda touched her grandmother's ring hanging from its chain. She thought about strength, not the kind that lifted weights or closed business deals, but the kind that kept going when everything fell apart, the kind that accepted help when pride demanded otherwise. She'd seen that kind of strength in Cassian today, beneath the frustration and loss. It reminded her of her grandmother's favorite saying, "Baby, sometimes God breaks us down to our foundation so we can build something stronger." Looking at her schedule for the rest of the day, Brenda pushed away the unexpected warmth she'd felt during their conversation. She was a professional after all, and he was her patient, nothing more. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that sometimes the strongest foundations were built in the moments when we were most broken. 1 week into his recovery, Cassian faced his first major challenge, a visit from Lawrence Preston, the CFO of his company. Brenda was checking his morning vitals when Preston arrived, his expensive suit and polished demeanor a stark reminder of Cassian's former life. "Rhodes?" Preston nodded, hovering awkwardly at the doorway. "Good to see you, conscious." Brenda noticed Cassian's vital signs spike slightly on the monitor. "Remember your breathing exercises," she murmured quietly, adjusting his pillows before stepping back. "Lawrence," Cassian acknowledged, his voice steady despite the tension visible in his shoulders. "Come to check if I'm ready to sign papers." Preston shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, yes. The board, well, given the circumstances and your condition." He pulled out an envelope from his briefcase. "They're offering a generous severance package." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Brenda busied herself with checking medications, giving them privacy while remaining within earshot, a skill she'd perfected over years of nursing. 3 months, Cassian said finally, his voice carrying a hint of disbelief. "I was in a coma for 3 months, and they're already replacing me." "You have to understand the position we're in," Preston replied, placing the envelope on the bedside table. "The Morrison merger..." The Morrison merger that I orchestrated? Cassian interrupted, his hand unconsciously moving to twist his father's ring. The one I spent 18 months putting together. Preston straightened his tie. Business doesn't stop for anyone, Rhodes. You know that better than most. He glanced at his watch. The papers need to be signed by Friday. Legal will handle everything. You just need to sign. Cassian stared at the envelope for a long moment. 7 years, he said quietly. I gave that company 7 years of my life. Missed my father's funeral for a board meeting. Postponed my wedding twice for deals. He looked up at Preston. Tell me, Lawrence, did anyone from the board even visit while I was unconscious? The answering silence was deafening. That's what I thought. Cassian closed his eyes briefly. Leave the papers. I'll have my lawyer review them. After Preston left, Cassian remained silent, staring out the window. Brenda approached quietly, checking his blood pressure, which had elevated during the conversation. You knew, he said suddenly, not looking at her. You knew they hadn't visited. Yes, she admitted, but it wasn't my place to tell you. He turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his expression caught her off guard. Did anyone visit regularly, besides Andrea? I mean, before she... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Brenda considered her answer carefully. There was a janitor, she said finally. Ramon. He came by most nights after his shift. Said he remembered how you always treated him with respect. Asked about his family. She smiled softly. He brought fresh flowers every week. Cassian's eyes widened in recognition. Ramon Alvarez. His daughter was starting college. Pre-med at University of Washington. Brenda nodded. He said you wrote her a recommendation letter. A genuine smile crossed Cassian's face, the first Brenda had seen since his awakening. I remember that. Bright girl. Reminded me of my sister at that age. The smile faded. I should have done more things like that. It's never too late to live differently, Brenda said, checking his IV line. She noticed his breakfast tray was untouched. You need to eat, even if you're not hungry. Want to tell me about your sister while you try? Cassian picked up his spoon, the movement still slightly shaky but improving. Lily, he said, taking a small bite of oatmeal. She lives in Portland now. Teaches 3rd grade. He paused. I haven't been a very good brother lately. Lately is not forever, Brenda replied, pulling up a chair. It was technically time for her rounds, but something told her Cassian needed company more than her other patients needed an early check-in. As Cassian ate, he shared stories about Lily, how she'd practically raised him after their mother died, how she'd supported his career, even while gently questioning his priorities. Brenda noticed how his voice softened when speaking about family, how different he seemed from the corporate executive Preston had come to see. What about you? He asked suddenly. Any siblings? Brenda touched her grandmother's ring reflexively. No, it was just me and my grandmother growing up. In Atlanta. She rarely shared personal details with patients, but something about Cassian's genuine interest made her continue. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident. I was 8. Understanding flickered in Cassian's eyes. Is that why you became a nurse? Partly, she admitted. I spent a lot of time in hospitals as a kid, not as a patient, but visiting my parents before they passed. There was this one nurse, Miss Beatrice. She used to bring me apple juice and graham crackers, let me help her organize supplies. Brenda smiled at the memory. She showed me that sometimes the greatest kindness is just being present with someone during their darkest moments. Like you're doing now? Cassian asked softly. Their eyes met, and Brenda felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one she'd been steadfastly ignoring. This is my job, she said, standing up perhaps a bit too quickly. And speaking of which, I need to do my rounds. Brenda, Cassian called as she reached the door. Thank you for staying, for sharing. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and hurried into the hallway. At the nurse's station, she paused, taking a deep breath. This was dangerous territory. She'd seen it happen before. Patients developing feelings for their caregivers, nurses getting too emotionally involved. It was natural, given the intimate nature of recovery, but it wasn't real. Besides, she had sworn off relationships after Michael. The scars from that relationship, though invisible, still ached sometimes. She absently rubbed her wrist, remembering the bruises she'd hidden beneath long sleeves, the excuses she'd made to her grandmother. Nurse Carter? An aide interrupted her thoughts. They need you in room 305. Grateful for the distraction, Brenda immersed herself in work. But throughout the day, her thoughts kept drifting back to Cassian, to the vulnerability in his eyes when Preston left, to the warmth in his voice when he spoke about his sister, to the way he seemed to see beyond her professional facade. That evening, as she finished her shift, she passed by his room one last time. He was asleep, the severance package still unopened on his table. In sleep, the lines of worry smoothed from his face, and she could see traces of the man he must have been before success hardened him. "Good night, Cassian," she whispered, her fingers brushing her grandmother's ring. As she walked to her car, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Baby, sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the head is ready to admit it." But Brenda shook off the thought. She was a professional, and Cassian Rhodes was her patient. Nothing more could come of it. Yet as she drove home through the quiet Seattle streets, she couldn't quite convince her heart of what her head so firmly believed. 2 weeks into his recovery, Cassian's physical progress was remarkable. His determination in therapy had impressed even the most seasoned staff members, but it was the emotional walls that proved harder to break down. The morning started like any other, until Brenda arrived for her shift and found Cassian's room empty, his bed untouched. Her heart rate quickened as she checked the bathroom, also empty. She was about to call security when a young nurse rushed in. "He's in the garden," the nurse said, slightly out of breath. "Insisted on going down there at dawn." Wouldn't take no for an answer. Brenda found him in the hospital's small courtyard garden, seated on a bench beneath a maple tree. He wore the navy sweatpants and grey t-shirt his sister Lily had brought during her brief visit, a stark contrast to his former designer suits. His feet were bare against the dewy grass. "You're worrying my staff," Brenda said, approaching quietly. "I needed air," he replied, not looking at her. "Real air, not the recycled kind." She noticed the slightly crumpled papers in his hand, the severance package from Preston. "You opened it. $5 million, he said flatly. "That's what they think my life is worth. 15 years of 60-hour weeks, missed holidays, postponed dreams, all wrapped up in a neat little package with a corporate bow." Brenda sat beside him, maintaining professional distance while still offering presence. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, longer now than she suspected he'd ever worn it. "All my life, I've known exactly what to do. Every step planned, every move calculated." He laughed bitterly. "I even had a 10-year timeline for having kids, can you believe that? And now, he finally turned to look at her. "Now I can't even walk to this bench without getting winded. Now my fiancé's engaged to someone else. Yes, I saw the announcement in the business section. Now everything I thought I knew about my life feels like a lie." A cool morning breeze rustled the maple leaves above them. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out to its mate. "Want to hear something funny?" Brenda found herself saying. "When I was younger, I had my whole life planned too. Marriage at 25, 2 kids by 30, house with a white picket fence. The whole American dream." She touched her grandmother's ring unconsciously. "Then I met Michael." She hadn't meant to say his name, hadn't spoken it aloud in years, but something about this moment, about Cassian's raw honesty, broke down her careful walls. "What happened?" Cassian asked softly. "He was charming at first. Successful lawyer, active in the community. My grandmother adored him." Brenda's fingers traced the chain around her neck. "The control started small, suggestions about my clothes, comments about my friends. Then came the criticism, the isolation, the—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "One night he pushed me down the stairs, said I'd tripped. That's when my grandmother gave me this ring and told me real love doesn't leave bruises." Cassian's hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said, and the simple words carried genuine understanding. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Brenda said firmly. "I'm telling you because sometimes the life we plan isn't the life we're meant to live. Sometimes the universe has other ideas." "Like drunk drivers on Highway 99? "Like drunk drivers on Highway 99, she agreed. "The question isn't why it happened. The question is what you're going to do now." Cassian looked down at the severance papers. "I could retire, travel, do all the things I said I'd do someday." He crumpled the papers slightly. "But that feels like letting them win. Maybe winning isn't the point anymore," Brenda suggested gently. Before he could respond, his body tensed and a grimace crossed his face. Muscle spasms, a common occurrence during recovery. Without thinking, Brenda moved closer, her trained hands finding the knotted muscles in his shoulder. "Breathe through it," she instructed professionally, though she was acutely aware of his warmth beneath her fingers. "Like we practiced." Cassian followed her guidance, his breathing slowly steadying, but neither of them moved away when the spasm passed. For a moment, they sat in charged silence, her hand still resting lightly on his shoulder. "Why did you tell me about Michael?" he asked quietly. Brenda withdrew her hand, standing up quickly. We should get you back inside. You have physical therapy in an hour. Brenda, his voice stopped her. Please. She turned back, meeting his gaze. The morning sun caught the silver in his temples, and his blue-gray eyes held something that made her heart race. Because, she said finally, you needed to know you're not the only one who's had to rebuild from scratch. And because you trust me. There was a hint of hope in his question. You're my patient, Mr. Rhodes, she replied, deliberately using his formal name. Trust is part of the healing process, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Somewhere between the late-night vital checks and early morning conversations, between his quiet strength and unexpected kindness, Cassian had become more than just another patient, and that terrified her. We need to go inside, she said firmly. Can you make it back, or should I get a wheelchair? I can walk, he replied, though his voice was tired. As he stood, his legs wobbled slightly, and Brenda instinctively stepped closer to steady him. Their bodies brushed, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Brenda could feel his heart racing beneath her palm, could smell the fresh morning air on his skin. Warning bells rang in her head, but her body refused to move. Nurse Carter, a voice called from the doorway, breaking the spell. Dr. Anderson is looking for you. Brenda stepped back quickly, professional mask sliding back into place. Coming, she turned to Cassian. Use the handrail on your way back, and please don't leave your room without telling someone next time. He nodded, but his eyes held questions she wasn't ready to answer. As she hurried back inside, Brenda's grandmother's ring felt heavy against her chest, a reminder of past wounds and the risk of new ones. But for the first time in years, she wondered if some risks might be worth taking. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Cassian's hospital room as he struggled through another physical therapy session. 3 weeks into his recovery, the exercises had grown more challenging, pushing his limits further each day. 5 more steps, Devon encouraged, supporting Cassian as he gripped the parallel bars. Sweat darkened his grey t-shirt, his knuckles white from effort. Brenda watched from the doorway, clipboard in hand, trying to maintain professional distance. But she couldn't help noticing how different he looked now. Leaner, stronger, more determined. The corporate polish had been stripped away, revealing something far more genuine underneath. Suddenly Cassian's legs buckled. Before either Devon or Brenda could react, he caught himself, muscles trembling with effort. But instead of stopping, he pushed forward, completing the final steps. Enough for today, Devon said, helping Cassian into the wheelchair. You're making incredible progress, but we need to pace. Schedule another session for this evening, Cassian interrupted, still breathing heavily. That's not advisable. Brenda stepped in, her nursing instincts overriding her attempt at distance. Your body needs rest to recover. Cassian's jaw tightened. I need to get stronger. What you need is to stop pushing yourself to the breaking point, Brenda said firmly. Devon, I'll handle this. After the therapist left, Brenda began checking Cassian's vitals. His pulse was racing, blood pressure elevated. This isn't a race, she said softly. Isn't it? He grabbed her wrist suddenly, stopping her movements. His touch was gentle but urgent. Every day I spend in this room is another day the world moves on without me. Another day of being helpless, dependent. Let go of my wrist, Brenda said quietly. Something in her tone made him release her immediately. I'm sorry, he said, recognition flickering in his eyes. I didn't think you're past. Brenda stepped back, her heart pounding. Not from fear, Cassian's grip hadn't been threatening, but from the jolt of electricity that had shot through her at his touch. It's fine, she said professionally. But we need to talk about these self-destructive patterns. Self-destructive? A harsh laugh escaped him. I'm trying to get better. No, you're trying to punish yourself, Brenda countered. I've seen it before. Patients pushing too hard, too fast because they think they deserve the pain. You don't understand, don't I? Her voice rose slightly. You think you're the first person to have their life shattered, to feel helpless, weak. She touched her grandmother's ring unconsciously. Sometimes breaking down is part of breaking free. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Cassian stared at her, seeing past her professional facade to the woman who understood loss all too well. Your sister called, Brenda said finally, changing the subject. She's coming tomorrow, and Ramon stopped by while you were in therapy. Left those books you asked for. Cassian nodded, but his eyes never left her face. Why do you do that? Do what? Pull away. Every time we get close to something real, you retreat behind your nurse's clipboard. Because this isn't real, Brenda said firmly. What you're feeling, what you think you're feeling, it's a common response during recovery. Patients often develop emotional attachments to their caregivers. Is that what you think this is? Cassian's voice was quiet but intense. Transference, a psychological crutch? It doesn't matter what it is, Brenda replied. I'm your nurse. That's all I can be. Look me in the eyes, he challenged. Tell me you don't feel this too. Brenda met his gaze, ready to deny everything, but the words caught in her throat. In his blue-grey eyes she saw not the desperate gratitude of a patient, but something deeper, recognition, understanding, a connection that transcended their current roles. A knock at the door saved her from responding. Dr. Anderson entered carrying test results. Good news, Mr. Rhodes. At this rate of progress, we can start discussing discharge plans soon. The word discharge hit Brenda like a physical blow. She busied herself with straightening medical supplies, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. How soon? Cassian asked, and Brenda couldn't read his tone. Perhaps 2 weeks, assuming you continue to improve. You'll need outpatient therapy, of course, and home health care initially. Dr. Anderson continued outlining the plan, but Brenda barely heard her. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, Cassian would leave, and their daily interactions would end. She should have felt relieved. The growing tension between them would disappear. She could return to her carefully ordered life. Instead, she felt as though she was losing something she hadn't meant to find. Nurse Carter, Dr. Anderson's voice broke through her thoughts. Could you update Mr. Rhodes's charts with the new medication schedule? Of course, Brenda replied automatically. She gathered her things, not looking at Cassian. I'll return later for your evening check. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Brenda? She turned, professional mask firmly in place. Yes, Mr. Rhodes. Thank you for what you said earlier about breaking free. Their eyes met one final time, and in that moment, all their carefully constructed walls threatened to crumble. Brenda nodded quickly and left, her grandmother's ring pressing against her chest like a reminder of all the reasons she couldn't let herself feel what she was feeling. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. Sometimes the hardest walls to break down are the ones we build ourselves. But some walls, Brenda reminded herself, existed for a reason. Some boundaries needed to stay intact. Even if keeping them intact meant breaking her own heart in the process. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with its usual morning activity as Brenda stared into her untouched coffee. She'd switched shifts with another nurse to avoid being present for Lily's visit to Cassian, telling herself it was the professional thing to do. In reality, she needed space to think. Earth to Brenda. Monica, her fellow nurse, waved a hand in front of her face. You've been stirring that coffee for 5 minutes straight. Sorry, Brenda smiled weakly. Just tired. Monica gave her a knowing look. Nothing to do with tall, handsome, and recovering in room 412. Brenda's hand automatically went to her grandmother's ring. He's a patient, Monica, that's all. Right. That's why you switched shifts for the first time in 2 years. Monica's expression softened. Look, I've known you since nursing school. I was there after Michael. I've never seen you like this. Before Brenda could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Anderson. Need you in my office. Important. Saved by the bell, Monica said. But this conversation isn't over. Brenda found Dr. Anderson reviewing files in her office. The doctor looked up, her expression unreadable. Close the door, please. Brenda's heart raced. Had someone reported her unprofessional behavior? Had Cassian complained? I've received an interesting offer, Dr. Anderson began. From the National Medical Education Initiative. They're launching a pilot program in Atlanta, focusing on community healthcare education. They need a program coordinator with both nursing experience and teaching capabilities. Brenda's breath caught. Atlanta. Home. I recommended you, Dr. Anderson continued. They were particularly impressed by your work with the resident training program here. It's a 2-year contract, significant salary increase, opportunity for advancement. She slid a folder across her desk. They need an answer by next Friday. Brenda opened the folder with trembling hands. The opportunity was incredible. Exactly what she'd dreamed of doing. Teaching, making a difference on a larger scale, being closer to her grandmother. What about my patients here? She asked quietly. We'd arrange transitions over the next month. Dr. Anderson's voice softened. Including Mr. Rhodes. He's being discharged in 2 weeks anyway. Brenda closed the folder, her mind spinning. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. But Brenda, Dr. Anderson's eyes were kind but firm. Make this decision for the right reasons. Either way. Walking back through the hospital corridors, Brenda felt as though she was moving through a dream. The Atlanta position was perfect, a chance to start fresh, to make a real difference, to run away. She was so lost in thought that she almost collided with someone turning the corner. Strong hands steadied her, and she looked up into Cassian's surprised face. He was walking with a cane now, Lily supporting his other side. "Sorry," Brenda stepped back quickly. "I wasn't watching where—" "Brenda," Lily smiled warmly. "I'm so glad to finally meet you properly. Cassian's told me so much about you." Brenda forced a professional smile, avoiding Cassian's intense gaze. "All good things, I hope. How was your session with Dr. Anderson?" "Encouraging," Lily answered, "though my stubborn brother here keeps pushing too hard." "Some things are worth pushing for," Cassian said quietly, his eyes never leaving Brenda's face. The tension crackled between them until Lily cleared her throat. "I should get some coffee. Cassian, you okay to get back to your room?" "I'll make sure he gets there safely," Brenda offered, automatically stepping into her nursing role. They walked in silence, Cassian's cane tapping softly against the floor. His progress was remarkable, his stride almost normal, though still careful. "You switched shifts," he said finally. "I had some things to take care of." "Like avoiding me?" Brenda stopped, turning to face him. "Not everything is about you, Mr. Rhodes." "Back to Mr. Rhodes, are we?" His voice was tired. "After everything?" "There is no everything," Brenda insisted. "There can't be." "Because of Michael." The name hit her like a slap. "Don't." "Then because of what? Hospital policy? Professional ethics?" Cassian stepped closer, his free hand reaching for hers. "Or because you're scared?" Brenda backed away. "You don't know me." "Don't I?" His voice softened. "I know you touch that ring when you're nervous. I know you deflect personal questions with professional answers. I know you're strongest when you're taking care of others, but you never let anyone take care of you." "Stop." "I know you love gardenias, you always smell like them. I know you hum old jazz songs when you think no one's listening. I know you're brilliant and caring and terrified of letting anyone close enough to hurt you again." Tears threatened to spill from Brenda's eyes. "I got a job offer," she blurted out. "In Atlanta, teaching position. They need an answer by next Friday." Cassian's face went still. "When would you leave?" "A month." Brenda's voice cracked slightly. "It's a great opportunity. Is that why they offered it, or why you're considering it?" Before she could answer, an orderly rushed up. "Nurse Carter, emergency in 308. "I have to go," Brenda said, grateful for the interruption. "Brenda." Cassian's voice stopped her. "We're not finished." "Yes, we are," she replied, not looking back. "We have to be." She spent the rest of her shift in a blur of activity, deliberately keeping herself too busy to think. But as she drove home that evening, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Running away from love is still running away, baby." The Atlanta position would be perfect. A clean break, a fresh start. No complicated feelings, no ethical dilemmas, no risk of having her heart broken again. So why did it feel like she was making the biggest mistake of her life? At a red light, Brenda touched her grandmother's ring, remembering the day she'd received it. "Love ain't always safe," her grandmother had said, "but the safest love ain't always the truest." The light turned green, but Brenda sat there, tears finally falling freely. Sometimes the hardest decisions weren't between right and wrong, but between safe and true. Seattle's infamous rain pounded against the hospital windows as thunder rolled across the sky. The storm had knocked out power in several parts of the city, and though the hospital's backup generators hummed steadily, an air of tension permeated the corridors. Brenda hadn't meant to work this shift. She'd been deliberately avoiding evening duties since her conversation with Cassian 3 days ago. But when Monica called in sick, she couldn't refuse to cover. Not without raising questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Multiple traumas coming in from a highway pileup," Dr. Anderson announced at the nurses' station. "All hands on deck. Nurse Carter, I need you to check on your regular patients first, then report to the ER." Brenda's heart thumped as she approached room 412. Perhaps Cassian would be sleeping, but as she opened the door she found him by the window watching the storm. His discharge was scheduled for the next day, and his few belongings were already packed in a duffel bag Lily had brought. "Your last set of vitals for the night," Brenda said professionally, keeping her distance. "Have you made your decision?" Cassian asked without turning around. "About Atlanta. I haven't given them my answer yet." She moved to check the monitors, maintaining her clinical demeanor. "But it's an incredible opportunity. To run away, to make a difference," she corrected, though her voice wavered slightly. Lightning flashed, illuminating his profile. He'd changed in these weeks. Not just physically, but something deeper. The corporate mask had been completely stripped away, revealing a man both stronger and more vulnerable than she'd initially thought. "I signed the severance papers," he said suddenly, "but I'm not taking their job offer in the London office." This made Brenda pause. "They offered you a position?" "Junior partner, international division." He turned to face her. "A fresh start," they called it. "Away from Seattle. Away from everything." That would be good for your career," Brenda managed, though the thought of him in London made her chest tight. "My career," he laughed softly. "You know what I realized during all those therapy sessions? I've spent my entire life climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall." Before Brenda could respond, the lights flickered ominously. A crash of thunder shook the building, and suddenly the room plunged into darkness. The backup generator had failed. "Stay calm," Brenda said automatically, reaching for the emergency flashlight she kept in her pocket. "The auxiliary power should—" Her words cut off as she felt Cassian's hand close over hers in the darkness, warm and sure. She knew she should pull away, maintain professional distance. Instead, she found herself frozen, heart racing. "I'm not going to London," he said softly, his voice closer than she'd expected. "And you don't want to go to Atlanta." "You don't know what I want," she whispered. But there was no conviction in her words. "Don't I?" His other hand found her face in the darkness, fingers gentle against her cheek. "You're trembling." "This is inappropriate," she managed, but she didn't move away. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you feel nothing," he challenged. "Tell me I'm just another patient." Lightning flashed again, illuminating them for a brief moment. Brenda saw everything she'd been trying to deny in his expression, longing, understanding, and something deeper that terrified her. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" "Can't look you in the eyes and lie." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. "But I can't do this either. I'm your nurse." "For 8 more hours," he reminded her. "Then what's your excuse?" Before she could answer, her pager buzzed urgently. "Emergency room," she read in the dim light. "I have to go." "Brenda." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "We need to finish this conversation." "There's nothing to finish," she insisted, finally pulling away. "You're being discharged tomorrow. You'll go back to your life, I'll go to Atlanta, and we'll both pretend these weeks never happened. Is that what you really want?" Another flash of lightning illuminated the tears she hadn't realized were falling. "What I want doesn't matter. I learned that lesson with Michael." "I'm not Michael." "No," she agreed softly. "You're more dangerous, because you make me want to believe in second chances." Her pager buzzed again, more insistently this time. "Go," Cassian said, his voice rough with emotion. "But this isn't over." Brenda hurried through the darkened corridors, her mind racing faster than her feet. In the emergency room, chaos reigned. The storm had caused a multi-car pileup on the highway, and injured people were being brought in despite the power outage. "Nurse Carter!" Dr. Anderson called. "I need you here." For the next several hours, Brenda lost herself in the work she knew best, helping others, fixing what was broken, staying strong when everything around her threatened to fall apart. But even as she moved from patient to patient, her grandmother's ring felt heavy against her chest, like a reminder of unfinished business. As dawn broke, the storm finally began to ease. Power returned gradually to different parts of the hospital, and the emergency room chaos slowly subsided. Brenda found herself in the staff locker room, exhausted and emotionally raw. "Rough night?" Monica asked, appearing beside her. "You have no idea," Brenda replied, touching her grandmother's ring absently. "Actually, I do." Monica's voice was gentle. "I saw what happened in room 412 when the lights went out. The door was open." Brenda closed her eyes. "Nothing happened." "But something could have." Monica put a hand on her shoulder. "Brenda, I know you're scared. After Michael, anyone would be. But I also know you haven't smiled, really smiled, in years. Not until these past few weeks." "It doesn't matter," Brenda insisted. "He's leaving today and I have the Atlanta position. Do you remember what your grandmother told us that day we visited her? About how she met your grandfather?" Brenda nodded, tears threatening again. "She said sometimes love comes disguised as a detour. Maybe this is your detour," Monica suggested softly. "Maybe it's time to stop running and see where it leads." Before Brenda could respond, an aide appeared at the door. "Nurse Carter, Mr. Rhodes is asking for you. Says it's important." Brenda's heart leaped even as her mind screamed warnings. She looked at Monica, who simply smiled. "Some storms," her friend said wisely. "Clear the air." Morning light streamed through freshly washed windows. the storm's aftermath leaving everything looking somehow cleaner, clearer. Brenda stood outside room 412, her hand hovering over the door handle, heart pounding. She'd avoided this moment through hours of emergency room chaos, but she couldn't avoid it any longer. When she finally entered, Cassian was dressed in casual clothes Lily had brought, dark jeans and a soft grey sweater that made his eyes look more blue than grey. He was signing discharge papers, his movements sure and steady. No trace remained of the broken man who'd awakened in this room weeks ago. "Your ride is here," Brenda said professionally, though her voice betrayed a slight tremor. "Lily's waiting downstairs." Cassian looked up, his pen pausing mid-signature. "I asked for you earlier." Emergency room was chaos after the storm. She moved to check his vitals one final time, maintaining protocol, even though they both knew it was unnecessary. Multiple casualties, power outages. "Brenda." His hand caught hers as she reached for the blood pressure cuff. "Look at me." She did, against her better judgment. In the morning light, she could see every detail of his face, the slight silver at his temples, the new laugh lines around his eyes, the intensity of his gaze that made her breath catch. "I'm not taking the London position," he said quietly, "and I'm not going back to corporate law." This wasn't what she'd expected. "What are you going to do? Remember Ramon's daughter, the pre-med student?" When Brenda nodded, he continued, "She introduced me to a program that provides legal aid to patients dealing with medical debt and insurance battles. They need someone who understands both the corporate and human sides of healthcare." That's wonderful," Brenda managed, genuinely moved by how perfectly this path suited his transformation. "I start next month," he said, still holding her hand. "Here in Seattle." The implication hung in the air between them. Seattle, not London, a choice that left possibilities open. "Cassian," she began, but he cut her off. "Before you say anything, I need you to know something." He released her hand, but held her gaze. "These past weeks lying in this bed, I've had a lot of time to think about who I was, who I've become, what really matters." He stood, moving closer, and Brenda found herself rooted to the spot. "I thought I had everything figured out before the accident," he continued. "Success, status, a perfectly planned future. But I was just collecting trophies to fill an empty life." His voice softened. "And then I woke up to find someone who saw past all that, who saw me at my weakest and didn't look away." "I'm a nurse," Brenda whispered. "It's my job to help patients heal." "Is that all this is? A nurse helping her patient?" "It has to be." "Why?" "Because." Her voice cracked slightly. "Because anything else is complicated and messy and dangerous. Because I've spent years building walls to protect myself. Because you're scared," he finished gently. "So am I." This admission, this vulnerability from a man who'd once ruled boardrooms, struck her deeply. "The Atlanta position," she began, "is perfect for you," he acknowledged. "You'd be amazing at it. But is it what you want? Or is it just another wall?" Before she could answer, Monica appeared at the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Anderson needs the discharge papers right away. New admission coming in." Brenda stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place. "Of course. Mr. Rhodes, do you need help with your belongings?" The formality seemed to hit Cassian like a physical blow. "No," he said quietly. "I can manage." As he gathered his things, Brenda noticed something on the bedside table, a small journal she'd seen him writing in during late nights. He was leaving it behind. "Your journal," she called after him. "It's for you," he said, pausing at the door. "Read it when you're ready to stop running." Then he was gone, leaving Brenda alone in the room that had housed so many unspoken words. Her hands trembled as she picked up the journal, but she didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she began her end-of-shift routine, checking supplies, updating charts, maintaining the order that had always given her comfort, but every movement felt mechanical, empty. "You okay?" Monica asked, returning to help clean the room. "Fine," Brenda replied automatically, then stopped. "No, I'm not fine. I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of making the wrong choice, of getting hurt again, of—" She touched her grandmother's ring. "Of wanting something I shouldn't want." Monica watched her for a moment, then said, "You know what I think. I think sometimes the things we shouldn't want are exactly the things we need most. It's not that simple." "No," Monica agreed. "But maybe it's not as complicated as you're making it." She picked up the journal Cassian had left, holding it out. "Maybe the answer is right here, waiting for you to be brave enough to read it." Brenda stared at the journal, remembering all the nights she'd seen Cassian writing in it, his face thoughtful in the dim light. What truths lay within those pages? What words had he needed to write rather than speak? "The Atlanta program called," she said suddenly. "They need my answer by tomorrow morning. And I don't know what to tell them." Monica squeezed her shoulder gently. "Yes, you do. You're just not ready to admit it yet." As they finished cleaning the room, Brenda's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Anderson. "Whatever you decide, make sure you're running towards something, not away from it." Brenda sat heavily in the chair where she'd spent so many hours watching over Cassian. The journal lay in her lap, its pages holding words that could change everything, or confirm that she was right to maintain her walls. Outside, Seattle was coming back to life after the storm. Somewhere in the city, Cassian was starting his new life, one that deliberately kept him close to her orbit. The choice he'd made spoke volumes, but was she brave enough to hear what it was saying? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes, baby, the biggest risk isn't in loving someone. It's in letting the chance to love pass you by." With trembling fingers, Brenda opened the journal to its first page. The hospital's night shift was beginning as Brenda sat in the empty break room, Cassian's journal open in her lap. She'd waited hours to read it, finishing her shift in a daze of routine tasks and automated responses. Now, in the quiet of evening, his words finally lay exposed before her. Day 1 after waking. "The world feels strange, like I'm watching it through foggy glass. Everything I thought I knew seems distant, unreal. But there's one clear thing. The nurse with kind eyes who doesn't treat me like I'm broken. She sees something in me I thought I'd lost. I don't even know her full name yet." Brenda's fingers traced the slightly shaky handwriting of those early entries. She remembered those first days, his struggle to hold a pen, his determination to write despite the difficulty. Day 7. Brenda Elise Carter. "I heard another nurse use her full name today. It suits her. Elegant but strong like her. She thinks I don't notice how she touches that ring when she's worried, or how she hums jazz when she's changing IV bags. Little pieces of herself she lets slip through her professional armor." Her hand went automatically to her grandmother's ring as she read those words. Had she been so transparent? Day 12. The corporate wolves came today, dressed in suits that used to feel like a second skin to me. Looking at them now, all I see are expensive masks hiding empty men. But Brenda, she treats the janitor who brings flowers with the same respect she shows the chief of surgery. She sees people, not positions. When did I forget how to do that? Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away and read on. Day 15. Had another dream about the accident today, but this time, instead of fear, I felt something else. Gratitude, not for the crash itself, but for the wake-up call. I've spent 15 years chasing a life that was slowly killing my soul. Maybe sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you never knew you needed. The pages turned, revealing more insights, more quiet observations. His growing strength, his changing perspectives, his deepening feelings, all laid bare in careful handwriting that grew steadier with each entry. Day 23. She told me about Michael today. I saw the shadows in her eyes, the scars that run deeper than skin. I wanted to hold her, to promise her that not all love leaves bruises, but I saw her walls go up, practiced and perfect. She's so used to being strong, she's forgotten she deserves to be cherished. Brenda's hands trembled as she turned to the final entry, dated that morning. Last day. How do you tell someone they've changed your life, that in trying to help you heal, they've healed parts of you that were broken long before any accident? The lawyers would call what I feel transference, a patient's misplaced emotions toward their caregiver, but they don't see how she holds herself apart, maintaining professional distance, even as her eyes betray deeper feelings. They don't know how she fights against every genuine connection, not because she's cold, but because she's protecting a heart that's known too much pain. I'm leaving this journal for her because there are things that need to be said, but she's not ready to hear them face to face. So I'll leave these words as breadcrumbs, hoping they'll lead her back when she's ready to stop running. Brenda, if you're reading this, I know you're scared. I know you've built your walls brick by brick, year by year. I know Atlanta feels safe, feels right, feels like the sensible choice. But I think, in the quiet moments when you're truly honest with yourself, that it's just another wall. I'm not asking you to tear down all your defenses. I'm not asking for promises or guarantees. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that not every love story has to end in pain, that some risks are worth taking, that sometimes the deepest healing happens when we let someone else help us carry our scars. I'll be at Pioneer Square tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. by the old pergola. If you come, we'll take things slow, one day at a time. If you don't, I'll understand. Either way, know this. You've taught me that true strength isn't in never falling, but in how we choose to rise again. The choice is yours, Brenda Elise Carter. No pressure, no demands, no expectations, just possibility. The journal fell closed in her lap as Brenda finally let her tears fall freely. Outside her window, Seattle's lights twinkled against the night sky, each one a tiny beacon in the darkness. Her phone lay on the table, the Atlanta program's number ready to be dialed. One call and she could take the safe path, the sensible route, the road she'd planned for herself. She could keep her walls intact, her heart protected, her life carefully controlled. But as she reached for the phone, her grandmother's ring caught the light, and with it came a memory, not of Michael's betrayal or the pain that followed, but of an earlier lesson, one she'd almost forgotten. She was 8 years old, crying after falling from her bike. Her grandmother had held her close and whispered, "Baby, life's gonna knock you down sometimes, but you got two choices. You can stay down where it's safe, or you can get back up and remember that every scar you carry is proof you were stronger than whatever tried to hurt you." Brenda touched the ring, feeling its familiar warmth. Then, with hands that no longer trembled, she picked up her phone and began to type. Dr. Anderson, about the Atlanta position. The late afternoon sun painted Pioneer Square in shades of gold and amber as the old clock tower struck 6. Brenda sat in her car, parked a block away, watching people pass beneath the historic pergola. She'd arrived an hour early, giving herself time to change her mind, to drive away, to choose safety over possibility. She'd spent the morning tying up loose ends at the hospital. Dr. Anderson had read her message about Atlanta, responded with a simple, "I understand." Sometimes the best path isn't the most obvious one. Monica had hugged her tightly, whispering, "About time," in her ear. Now, wearing a simple sundress in deep purple, her grandmother's favorite color, Brenda touched the ring that hung around her neck. For the first time in years, she unclasped the chain, sliding the ring off and holding it in her palm. "What would you say now, Gran?" she whispered. "About taking chances? About letting love in?" As if in answer, a warm breeze rustled through the square's maple trees, carrying the faint scent of gardenias from a nearby flower stand. Brenda smiled, remembering how Cassian had noticed her perfume, one of many small details he'd observed, while she thought she was maintaining professional distance. At 6:45, she finally stepped out of her car. Each click of her heels on the pavement felt like a heartbeat, a countdown, a choice being made with every step. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving the square peaceful in the fading light. She saw him before he saw her. Cassian stood beneath the pergola, no longer in hospital clothes but in dark jeans and a blue button-down that made his eyes seem deeper, more intense. He held a single gardenia, twirling it slowly between his fingers as he watched the sunset. For a moment, Brenda allowed herself to really look at him, not as a nurse observing a patient, but as a woman seeing a man who had journeyed from broken to rebuilt, from guarded to open, from lost to found. He'd chosen to stay in Seattle, to remake his life, to leave possibility open. Now it was her turn to choose. "You're early," she said softly, stepping into view. Cassian turned, the flower pausing mid-twirl. His eyes took her in, the dress, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, the absence of her professional armor, but most of all, he noticed the ring now worn on her right hand instead of hidden on its chain. "So are you," he replied, a smile touching his lips. "I nearly didn't come." "I know." He held out the gardenia. "But you did." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the flower, and neither pulled away. Around them the square had grown quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "I turned down Atlanta," Brenda said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Because of me?" "No." She met his gaze directly. "Because of me. Because running away isn't the same as moving forward. Because—" She touched her grandmother's ring, now a symbol of courage rather than protection. "Because sometimes the safest choice isn't the right one." Cassian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his hair, catching the last rays of sunlight. "And what is the right choice?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'd like to find out. Slowly, one day at a time." "Slowly," he agreed, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "We both have healing to do, and boundaries to respect, and fears to overcome, and trust to build." With each statement, they drew incrementally closer, the space between them filling with unspoken understanding. When Cassian finally took her hand, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You know," he said softly, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the corporate lawyer, not the broken patient, just me. Brenda smiled, squeezing his hand gently. You saw me too, even when I was trying so hard not to be seen. The last light of day wrapped around them as they stood there. Two people who had found each other in the space between breaking and healing, between professional distance and personal connection, between fear and hope. Would you like to get coffee? Cassian asked. There's a little jazz place around the corner, no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other outside hospital walls. I'd like that, Brenda replied, and meant it. As they walked together through the deepening twilight, their steps falling naturally in sync, Brenda felt something shift inside her. Not the crumbling of walls, but the opening of a door she'd kept locked for too long. They didn't hold hands as they walked. They didn't need to. Sometimes the strongest connections are built in the quiet spaces between gestures, in the understanding that healing happens not in grand moments, but in small choices, day by day, step by step. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Seattle's lights twinkled to life, each one a reminder that after every storm, after every darkness, light finds its way back. And sometimes, in the most unexpected places, hearts find their way home. As they reached the jazz club's door, Brenda paused, looking back at Pioneer Square's pergola, the place where one chapter ended and another began. Cassian waited patiently, understanding without words that some moments need to be marked, remembered, honored. Ready? He asked when she turned back to him. Brenda touched her grandmother's ring one last time, feeling not the weight of the past, but the promise of the future. Yes, she said, I'm ready. And she was, ready to see where this path might lead, ready to take a chance on love that built up instead of tore down, ready to discover that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in standing alone, but in letting someone walk beside you. As they stepped into the warm glow of the jazz club, the soft notes of a familiar melody wrapped around them. At Last, by Etta James. Brenda smiled, recognizing it as one of the songs she used to hum during her night shifts. Some might call it coincidence, others might call it fate. But for Brenda and Cassian, it was simply the first note of their own song, finally ready to be played. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better, a real beginning, built on truth, shaped by growth, and open to all the possibilities that courage and time might bring. This was where their heart's journey truly began. 1 year later, the Seattle General Hospital's annual charity gala transformed the downtown Marriott's ballroom into an elegant wonderland of soft lights and flowing champagne. Brenda stood near the entrance, greeting arriving guests with practiced ease. As the newly appointed Director of Nursing Education, she had helped organize the event, which would fund scholarships for underprivileged nursing students. She touched her grandmother's ring, now worn proudly on her right hand, a habit that had transformed from a nervous gesture into one of grounding and strength. The purple evening gown she wore, another nod to her grandmother's favorite color, drew admiring glances, but her eyes searched the crowd for only one person. Looking for me, Cassian's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. She turned to find him holding 2 glasses of sparkling water, his blue-gray eyes twinkling with affection. You're late, she chided softly, accepting one of the glasses. Last-minute case, he explained. Ramon's daughter, she's interning at the legal aid clinic now, found a family who lost their home due to medical bills. We filed an emergency injunction. Did you win? His smile was answer enough. In the past year, Cassian had become known for taking on seemingly impossible cases, fighting for patients caught between medical debt and insurance bureaucracy. The corporate shark had transformed into a defender of the vulnerable, though he'd kept his strategic brilliance and determination. Ramon's here somewhere, Cassian said, scanning the crowd. He's receiving an award for 20 years of service. I know. I nominated him. Brenda smiled, remembering the janitor who had faithfully brought flowers to Cassian's room. His daughter starts medical school next fall. They moved through the crowd together, stopping to chat with hospital staff and supporters. Their relationship was common knowledge now, but they maintained professional boundaries at work. Brenda still dedicated to her patients, Cassian focused on his cases. It was in the quiet moments between their busy lives that they had built something real and lasting. Dr. Anderson was looking for you earlier, Cassian mentioned as they found a quiet corner. Something about the Atlanta program wanting to partner with your education initiative here. Brenda nodded. They want to expand the training model we developed. Turns out staying in Seattle didn't mean giving up the chance to make a bigger difference. Speaking of staying, Cassian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Lily called. "The house next door to her in Portland is up for sale. She thinks we should look at it." They'd been discussing moving in together, taking the next step in their carefully paced relationship. Portland would mean being closer to Lily, while still allowing them to continue their work in the Pacific Northwest. "What do you think?" he asked, when she didn't immediately respond. Brenda looked up at him, this man who had learned to rebuild himself, who had taught her that love could be both passionate and patient, who understood that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in life's detours. "I think," she said softly, "that home isn't about the place. It's about who you're with." Cassian's smile deepened, creating the crinkles around his eyes that she'd grown to love. He pulled her slightly closer, respecting the public setting but unable to resist the gravity between them. "Does that mean yes?" "It means we can look," she replied with a playful smile. "One step at a time, remember?" "Always." Monica passed by, shooting them a knowing grin. "Hey, lovebirds, they're about to start the presentations. Brenda, you're up first." As they made their way to their seats, Brenda caught a whiff of gardenias, someone's corsage or boutonniere. The scent took her back to that evening under Pioneer Square's pergola, when she'd chosen possibility over safety. Cassian squeezed her hand gently. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just remembering," she said, "and being grateful for second chances." "And third chances," he added, "and fourth chances. As many as it takes." The lights dimmed for the presentations, but Brenda held on to the moment, knowing that some things, like trust, like healing, like love, don't happen in single dramatic instances. They happen in the accumulation of small choices, quiet moments, and steady hearts brave enough to try again. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain had paused, leaving the city gleaming under starlight. Inside, two people who had found each other in life's unexpected turns sat together, their futures unfolding not in grand gestures, but in the simple certainty that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about passion overcoming all odds, but about two hearts learning to beat in harmony, two souls finding home in each other's quiet strength. And in that truth, they had both been reborn.